Chapter 72. 2. Chapter 72. 2. The Crown Prince's own brothers were locked in mutual discord. Scheming was the most intolerable thing to him. A whole family filled with conspiracies was the thing he couldn't stand. Therefore, whenever he saw internal strifes, he would be very ruthless. In her previous life, Xianli took advantage of this specific trait and roped the fourth prince in, since the most harmless-looking fourth prince had always been close to the Crown Prince. In the end, the Crown Prince was framed by this close brother and ended up dead in prison. Xianli revealed this thing to her when the fight was already at the late stage. He was not as gentle and prudent as he used to be, showing some arrogance. He derided and scorned this brotherly trust. However, Zhang Ruan could understand the Crown Prince. He was just a pathetic man who, in his extreme loneliness, longed for familial affections and invested his most important trust in the wrong person. But as was the same case as hers, they'd both been betrayed. The Crown Prince surely thought of his own situation when he saw the actions of the Xia family against her. The more excessive the Xia family treated her, the more ruthless the Crown Prince's heart became. Had it not been for Xianli's presence today, probably, the Xia family would not suffer such a simple punishment as beatings with the plank. However, Xianli still stood with the Xia family after all. Zhang Ruan's eyes darkened. She wondered if in this life Xianli would act the same as in the previous one and marry Jiang Susu in the end. She was looking forward to that very moment. After the excruciating 20 beatings, Xia Jiao fainted. Zhang Ruan smiled faintly. Maternal grandmother's matter has been brought to a close, but Your Highness hasn't made a judgment about the Ancestral Hall's issue. How should the perpetrator in the Ancestral Hall be dealt with? Hu Dai was assisting Jiang Susu from the chair. Yet, upon hearing this, Jiang Susu's body turned weak and almost fell down. She stared incredulously at Zhang Ruan. Xia Cheng glared at Zhang Ruan as if he wanted to devour her. Xia Yan acted as if she had just heard of this. What happened in the Ancestral Hall? Then, she suddenly thought of something and looked at Zhang Ruan suspiciously. How come after spending a whole night in the cold and gloomy Ancestral Hall Zhang Ruan still looked good, without the slightest sign of weakness? And what about the perpetrator she was talking about? Zhang Ruan met Xia Yan's puzzled glance and answered her with a smile. Last night Ruan Yang prayed for Xia ancestors in the Ancestral Hall, but couldn't endure the exhaustion in the middle of the night. So Nyang's servant girl knelt on Ruan Yang's behalf. But who knew that a robber would come in the dark and defile the body of the servant girl? As such, Ruan Yang has asked Your Highness for a grace to severely punish the villain. Xia Yan was a little confused by her words, but she still understood her meaning. Someone wanted to stain her, but he was blocked by Zhang Ruan's servant girl. Xia Yan secretly resented why Zhang Ruan was so lucky every time. She looked at Lian Xiao at Zhang Ruan's side. Zhang Ruan only brought Lian Xiao and Xu Xiang when she came out this time. Lian Xiao stood in place looking perfectly all right. Was it possible that the person who suffered in her place was Xu Xiang? Her heart tensed up. Zhang Ruan spoke again. Maternal grandfather, since His Royal Highness the Crown Prince is here, it would be better to bring the villain here. Xia Cheng was about to spit blood. He was sure that Zhang Ruan must have known Xia Jun's identity. She must have acted on purpose. He felt that Zhang Ruan had a deep and terrible scheme. Zhang Ruan looked at Xia Yan. It's all thanks to mother who gave me a good servant girl. This servant girl is loyal and considerate. I like her very much. If it wasn't for her last night, perhaps Ruan Yang would have had no choice but to die today. This loyal servant was given by mother, and so she would also want to avenge Xu Xiang's grievances. Xia Yan couldn't say a word. Xianli listened to Zhang Ruan and gave her a meaningful look. The Crown Prince knew that the man in the Ancestral Hall was Xia Jun, so he didn't speak. He just looked at Xia Cheng with a gloating expression. Xia Cheng wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and finally said in a sinking voice, "Nonsense, that's not a villain, that's your cousin." As soon as this remark came out, not only Xia Yan but Shun Rou and Yuya froze as well. Yuya cried out, "How can it be Juner?" Maternal grandfather, Zhang Ruan looked at him in surprise. That man defiled my servant girl's body. How could he be my cousin? Her words were full of surprise, but she reminded everyone of the fact that Xia Jun ruined a person's innocence. Xianli paused while Xiao Xiao watched Zhang Ruan's excellent acting. He couldn't help but curve his lips up slightly. There was also a glimpse of a smile in his perpetually cold eyes. Yuya asked anxiously, "What's going on? What happened to Junior?" Zhang Ruan replied, "Maternal aunt, maternal grandfather and His Royal Highness saw someone demonstrating immoral conduct in the ancestral hall at dawn today. I didn't expect the man to be my cousin." When Yuya heard this, she took 2 steps backwards. She couldn't understand. Although her son's actions were frivolous, he wouldn't be so stupid as to do such a thing in a place like the ancestral hall. There must be an ulterior motive. When Xia Yin saw Jiang Susu's resentful expression, she was startled and immediately understood what was going on. Jiang Susu did not know that she and Xia Foran had already discussed the countermeasures and had actually acted on her own plan without permission. She must have been trapped by Zhang Ruan again. Exasperated at Jiang Susu's disobedience, she quickly pondered about the way to deal with the situation at hand. If something really happened to Xia Jun, neither Xia Cheng nor Yuya would spare this pair of mother and daughter. After all, Xia Jun was the only legitimate grandson of the Xiaofu, and would inherit the family property in the future. Xia Cheng gritted his teeth. After seeing that this matter had turned this way, he could only allege that Xia Jun was seduced by the servant girl. He shouted angrily, "Bring that unfilial son and servant girl here." The servants soon brought in the still dazed Xia Jun and Xu Xiang. However, it didn't take long for the 2 of them to sober up. Xia Cheng stepped forward and slapped Xia Jun in the face. "Unfilial son? Who told you to do such a thing?" Xia Jun felt confused and disoriented at first by Xia Cheng's slap. Yuya rushed up to hug him and cried, "My son, why are you so stupid? Why did you act muddle-headed in the ancestral hall?" When Xia Jun became sober, he learned from an old servant what had happened. As soon as he entered the ancestral hall last night, he felt a little feverish and even out of control, and the madness of that night was still there. But obviously it was eldest Jiang Miss who had slept with him. How did she become eldest Jiang Miss' servant girl? Just then, his gaze fell on the girl in red standing in the middle of the crowd. She was smiling gently but was actually looking at him with mockery. Xia Jun then immediately understood that it must have been eldest Jiang Miss who had calculated against Jiang Susu and even him. His mind swerved. He suddenly knelt down and kowtowed to Xia Cheng. "Grandfather, it's all my fault. I was drunk on wine last night and entered the ancestral hall by mistake. Unexpectedly, this servant girl seduced me. Grandson, for such a thing to happen, is really ashamed asking grandfather for punishment." Xia Cheng breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Xia Jun was smart and knew to admit his mistakes on his own initiative. Xu Xiang was stupefied. She hadn't foreseen Xia Jun to denounce her right in the face. She looked at Zhang Ruan. It was very clear that Zhang Ruan had set her up. She had to look to Xia Yan for help. Xia Yan did not look back and acted as if she didn't know anything. Xu Xiang's heart was filled with despair, and she cried out, "No, it's not this servant's fault. Eldest miss, this servant really didn't seduce young master." Zhang Ruan looked at her with pity. "Xu Xiang, I naturally believe you. You are the servant girl mother personally chose for me. How can I not trust your character?" When Xia Yin heard that, she felt a throbbing between her eyebrows. When Zhang Ruan said it like that, she could not say anything else. But looking at Xia Cheng's furious eyes, she had to force herself to say, "Ruan Yang, one may know a person for a long time without knowing her true nature. Xu Xiang usually seemed to be upright and honest, but I didn't expect her to have such a dirty mind." It was a blatant lie, lying with eyes wide open. Lian Xiao couldn't hide her contempt. Xia Yin really had the gall to use such a reason. Zhang Ruan sighed softly. "I thought the person chosen by mother must be excellent. Unexpectedly, Lian Xiao, Baiji, or even Lu Zhu, all who I have chosen myself, have never shown such a surprising thing, but Xu Xiang, chosen by mother, broke the precepts." She looked at Xia Yan. "Mother, please take the other servant girls in Ruan Yang's courtyard back." Xia Yin was astonished. She clenched her teeth secretly. She had placed those spies with great difficulty, and now everything was being pulled out by Zhang Ruan's words. But at present she could only agree. Ruan Yang's thinking is reasonable. It's mother that's thoughtless. No, no, eldest miss. I didn't seduce young master. Foreign, save me. Second miss, save me. Xu Xiang cried desperately. The crown prince sneered. You are the servant girl of eldest Jiang miss. How can you plead with second miss? Your highness has no idea, Zhang Ruan smiled. Second younger sister is the most soft-hearted. Whenever the servants make mistakes, they all like to plead with her. And I have always been unfeeling, and so the servants are afraid of me. Xiao Xiao raised his eyebrows. Zhang Ruan spoke again. Xu Xiang, although I trust you, I trust mother more. Since she has said so, there's nothing I can do about it. She threw all the blame onto Xia Yan. Xu Xiang immediately felt a burst of despair. Zhang Ruan added, but even if you didn't seduce my cousin, your body is defiled, and even in a place like the ancestral hall. If it were me, I would have already killed myself with a white damask silk. In order to protect your reputation, you have no way to live. Whether you seduced him or not, the result is the same. Xu Xiang shivered and looked at Zhang Ruan with fear. She suddenly understood that Zhang Ruan was right. Today she really had no way to live. Zhang Ruan wouldn't take the initiative to save her. Between her and Xiajun, Xia Yan would only choose Xiajun. No one would speak for her. She finally understood that while Zhang Ruan knew perfectly well that she had been sent by Xia Yan, but still let her stay in Ruanju, it was not because of Zhang Ruan's soft-heartedness. She was just looking for an opportunity to remove her with one move, with no possibility to recover. Now was that opportunity. She realized that she was going to die no matter what, and there was no way out while her family's life was still in the hands of Xia Yan. Xu Xiang laughed bitterly. This servant feels disgraced to face eldest miss. I beg eldest miss to take care of this servant's parents. See you in the next life. With that, she broke free from the old servant's grasp, and before they could react, they saw her crashing into a pillar in the hall and collapsing in a pool of blood. Her eyes opened wide, her body shook a few times, and she died with everlasting regret. Jiang Susu let out an ah, her face blanched. She naturally knew that the death of Xu Xiang was ultimately related to her, and she was frightened. Xia Jun was also surprised that the beautiful woman of last night's ecstasy was now dripping with blood. It was really terrifying. Zhang Ruan watched quietly. Her last life in prison came to mind, seeing Xu Xiang following Jiang Susu. Time flew. In this life, Xu Xiang had no chance to betray and hurt her. The crown prince said, "This servant girl is a strong one. Bengong feels sorry that she died like this. Although the servant girl has paid with her life, young Master Xia is not completely without fault either. Bengong is kind-hearted. Since he is still young, he won't be punished. However, he can't enter into officialdom for the next 3 years. Bengong will report everything that I've seen and heard today without any omission to my imperial father. Old Marquis Xia, please conduct yourself well." Having said that, his expression changed. He left in a huff without laughing and joking like he did earlier. Xianli paused for a moment, then ran after him. Yuya helped Xiajun into the house. Xiacheng followed behind. Jiang Susu and Xia Yan also hurriedly followed. Servant girls and old servants scattered and walked away. There was no one else in the hall at that moment. Zhang Ruan walked to Xu Xiang's body lying in the pool of blood. She looked quietly at the servant girl who died without peace and spoke faintly. "You may as well have your eyes wide open. On your journey to the Yellow Springs, turn into a fierce ghost, but don't haunt the wrong person." Huangquan, the Yellow Springs / the underworld of Chinese mythology / the equivalent of Hades or Hell. As she finished speaking and turned around, she directly faced an elegant and heroic face. Xiao Xiao's cold gaze fell on her face. The two were at close proximity. She heard his faint comment, "You're very ruthless." Zhang Ruan stepped back and smiled at him. "What has this to do with you?" Chapter 73. Chapter 73. Xiao Xiao looked down at her. Zhang Ruan was young, and although she was taller than most of the girls her age, she still only reached up to Xiao Xiao's chest. After Xiao Xiao heard her words, he did not get angry, but his long and slightly curved eyelashes hung low as he said, "Xia Chong will not let you off. In this world there are many people who will not let me off." Zhang Ruan looked straight into his eyes. "Regardless, I am not dead yet. She gave a half-smile. Wang Ye is already busy with his own affairs. How come he has the heart to care for others? Xiao Xiao was momentarily stunned. In the court everyone respected him, feared him and flattered him. Yet there were also numerous people who wished to harm him. His situation was very similar to this daughter of the Jiangfu. However, he had never been afraid even if he was surrounded by murderous intentions, because, he said indifferently, this prince has the capability to protect himself. Do you have it? Wang Ye does not need to worry about Ruan Yang. Zhang Ruan carefully kept a distance from him because once bitten, twice shy. After all, he had once saved Jiang Su. Therefore who knew what motives he had. Furthermore, she did not hesitate to treat anyone who was related to Jiang Su as an enemy. Jining Wang was no exception. Whether Ruan Yang has the capability to protect herself or not, hasn't Wang Ye seen it clearly? She thought for a moment then said, "It is beneficial to sit on the fence, but in the end isn't it shameful? Since you have already chosen your side, don't easily change your mind. Be careful or else you might offend both parties." With that, she directly headed out and no longer cared about Xiao Xiao. Xiao Xiao stood in the same spot. Just now he obviously understood Zhang Ruan's words were an admonishment not to be someone who sat on the fence. Yifeng, who stood at the side, said, "This eldest Zhang miss is truly rude. Master helped her out of kindness, yet she's still being so sarcastic and mocking." Yifeng. Xiao Xiao interrupted him. Return to the Fu. Meanwhile, inside the residence, Yuya was silently dabbing at her tears and Xia Cheng's face was gloomy. After seeing Xia Jun's ghostly white face, Xia Cheng couldn't contain his anger anymore as he pointed at Jiang Su. "You evil girl, kneel." Jiang Su panicked and hurriedly went to Xia Yan to use her as a shield. Xia Yan protected Jiang Su in her embrace and with a small voice said, "Father, what are you doing? Don't think I do not know why last night Junior went to the ancestral hall for no reason. Wasn't it a trick that this evil girl came up with? Now Zhang Ruan has suffered no harm, and yet your Biaoge has been used to satisfy other people's motives. How amazing!" Xia Jun creased his eyebrows, but Yuya let out a short shriek and the way she looked at Jiang Su instantly changed. "Is this true?" Jiang Su hid away from her own aunt's piercing gaze, saying, "Biaoge himself agreed to this matter. Furthermore, I only asked him to comfort de Jejia. If he didn't have those types of thoughts, how would it have escalated into this situation?" Biaoshan refers to your mother/father's brother's wife. After hearing what she said, Xia Jun's gaze became gloomy and he coldly snorted, "Comfort? You put an aphrodisiac into the incense burner, and you really thought no one would know?" This was something he had figured out later on. At that time, the ancestral hall was heavy with fumes, but he had merely thought that it was the ancestral hall's incense. However, when he became rational, he was immediately able to pinpoint what was suspicious. Yuya could no longer contain herself and rushed up, pulling Xia Yan away. "Pa!" A slap landed on Jiang Su's face. She had exerted a lot of force and thus Jiang Su was sent staggering. The veil obscuring her face fell down and revealed half of her hideous face. She gave a horrible shriek, covering her face while shouting, "What are you doing? What am I doing?" At this moment, Yuya had completely abandoned her image of a dignified and composed noble lady. She looked ferocious, as if she wanted to swallow Jiang Su whole. "You schemed against Junior like that and even used an aphrodisiac. Do you even have any sense of shame?" Second sister-in-law. Xia Yan shielded Jiang Su behind her. "You're too much. Junior too bears the responsibility in this matter. Why then is Su being blamed for everything?" Shun Ro was at a loss. She had never expected Jiang Su, daughter of a distinguished family, to use such underhanded methods. She had also not expected Xia Yan, who was usually a gentle sister-in-law, to act like a tigress on a rampage, baring her fangs and brandishing her claws. "Shut up." Xia Cheng was pushed to his limits and could no longer endure. He pointed at Jiang Su's nose and scolded, "Idiot, you are not even capable yet you want to learn from others and harm people. With just that little trick of yours, you're not scared people will laugh their heads off. Not only are you lacking in comparison to Zhang Ruan's schemes, you were even out-schemed by her, you fool." Although Xia Yan was dissatisfied with the way Xia Cheng spoke to Jiang Su, she had always been fearful of Xia Cheng and therefore did not dare to say anything at the moment. However, Xia Cheng's sentence of lacking in comparison to Zhang Ruan really sparked something in Jiang Susu, and in the heat of the moment she carelessly said, "Maternal grandfather is right. I am indeed lacking compared to Zhang Ruan and do not have the scheming mind. But what about maternal grandfather's own trick, the pastries? Wasn't it also seen through by others, and you even made a fool of yourself in front of the crown prince and eighth prince? Is maternal grandfather not stupid?" Xia Yin was frightened. She quickly covered Jiang Susu's mouth while Jiang Susu ferociously glared at Xia Chang, her gaze full of resentment. Xia Chang was boiling with violent rage, and one of his legs flew up and kicked Jiang Susu to the side. While gasping for breath, he said, "Evil girl, get out of here. Tomorrow morning, gather your Zhang family people and get out of my fu. I will take it that I never had you, this daughter and this granddaughter." Maternal grandfather. Seeing the situation, Zhang Chao, who had had a frowning face throughout, hurriedly said, "Younger sister only panicked for a moment. She did not mean to purposely talk back to you. I'll ask for forgiveness from you on her behalf." Ever since Xia Chang had achieved his current title, he'd always received a lot of flattery. Thus, when had he ever been contradicted by people? Not to mention, Jiang Susu had poked at his sore spot, and so he became livid from the shame and could not put up with the Jiang family people any longer. Without sparing a glance at Zhang Chao, he gave a scornful laugh. "I am afraid that it is her who simply does not put me highly, this grandfather, in her eyes." Then, he left with a flick of his sleeve. Jiang Susu was again kicked to the ground by Xia Chang, and she covered her face without saying anything. Only, her gaze was gloomy like a poisonous snake. Just then, Yuya stood in front of her and coolly said, "This matter will not be resolved so easily. You have harmed my junior, and now for the next 3 years he is not allowed to step into the officialdom. If you do not give me an explanation on this, I will definitely teach you a lesson and make you regret it for the rest of your life. At that time, don't say that this aunt never gave you, my niece, any face." After that, she supported Xia Jun and walked out without looking at the mother and daughter pair. The event had escalated to this extent, and it was not good for Shan Ro to continue staying. She smiled and said, "I'll go take a look and see how Jiao Jiao is." She too left without any acknowledgement. The Xia family's 2 young masters were not there, otherwise, who knew how the matter would have evolved further. The house was empty without a single person, and Jiang Susu suddenly started wailing loudly with her face still covered. "Mother, mother, how could they treat me like this?" Although Xia Yin was also furious that Jiang Susu took things into her own hands and settled Zhang Ruan herself, Jiang Susu was still her own flesh and blood. Xia Yin felt heartache at her sorry state and pulled Jiang Susu into her embrace. "It was mother's fault. Mother originally wanted your maternal grandfather to help scheme against Zhang Ruan, but didn't expect Zhang Ruan to be this cunning. Susu, mother is wrong. Mother should not have left that despicable person alive in the first place. 5 years ago I should have sent her and her short-lived mother to see Yama, the king of hell. Together my sewer has suffered." Jianyan Wang refers to when someone dies. Eldest younger sister is really not simple. Jiang Chao, who had stood gloomily to the side, continued further. "At this moment maternal grandfather is displeased with younger sister, and second aunt's family feels enmity towards us. Now that it is like this, what should we do?" "Do not panic, Chao, do not panic." Xia Yin dried Jiang Susu's tears. "Mother still has her ways. I will definitely render that despicable person unable to change her situation for the better." In the other room, Zhang Ruan was drinking tea with Lian Xiao. She had brought 2 servant girls along with her, and now that she was only left with one, it made people want to cry. Seeing Lian Xiao remain silent, Zhang Ruan said, "Do you find me cruel?" Lian Xiao was stunned and did not understand. "Miss, why do you speak such words? Xu Xiang was harmed by me, and while I obviously had the chance to save her I chose to keep quiet. Do you think I was overly cruel?" Zhang Ruan asked. Lian Xiao paused and only understood Zhang Ruan's words a moment later. She lowered her head and kneeled in front of Zhang Ruan. This servant has never had this thought. Although Xu Xiang's death was tragic, she only has herself to blame. If Miss did not do that yesterday, then today the one who died would possibly be Miss. This servant's master is young Miss. This servant will be someone who serves Miss for a lifetime. If Miss has any mishaps, this servant will never be able to live happily for the rest of her life. Her tone was relaxed and her words were decisive. Every sentence and every word was straightforward. Young miss is not cruel, and please never think of yourself as cruel. This servant has clearly seen what the intentions of the Jiang family and the Xia family are. It is already a feat for miss to continue living on, so why differentiate what methods are being used, as they are all used for self-preservation anyways. They are not kind in the first place, so how can they blame young miss for being unjust? Please stand up. Jiang Ruan lightly sighed. The waters in here are too murky. I do not wish to pull all of you in. It's just that you have seen today's matter, and from now on, similar events like this will happen near me. Remaining diligent and taking precautions will be beneficial to both you and the others as well. Lian Xiao felt a lump in her throat as she noiselessly got up. Ever since Zhang Ruan had returned to the Jiangfu, many things were left for Lu Zhu to settle, and it wasn't as if she didn't have her opinions about it. Lu Zhu was a second-rank servant girl, yet she seemed to be considered more trustworthy by Zhang Ruan than a first-rank servant girl. However, after really going through the matter involving the Xiaofu and witnessing a true battle take place right in front of her, that little discontent in her heart immediately dispersed like clouds. She raised her head and looked at Zhang Ruan. She and the others had been living with Zhang Ruan since they were little. Ever since Zhang Ruan was still an unworldly young lady from a wealthy family, they had already been accompanying her. Throughout the journey in which she experienced the pain of losing her mother, was bullied in the countryside residence, disliked by her own biological father, separated from her elder brother, everything took place before their eyes and they had seen everything. Yet, while not knowing exactly when it had started, that cowardly and meek young miss had totally disappeared, replaced by a ruthless, beautiful Zhang Ruan who was resolute in her attacks. This type of change led people to feel not only gratification but also heartache. Miss, they must have had another motive for coming to the Xiaofu at this time. Lian Xiao continued, since Miss has already become a thorn in the eyes of the Xiao family. Zhang Ruan smiled faintly. What other motives can they have? Eighth Prince was here and Xia Yan hurriedly rushed here. Obviously it was to beg Eighth Prince to be an intermediary and negotiate with the Li family on their behalf. Then as of now, Lian Xiao asked, second younger sister has offended the Xia family people. The Xia family will not help the Zhang family to get even for the time being. A married daughter is like spilled water, therefore, will old Marquis Xia be willing to give up his biological grandson for his daughter's children? The Xia family's second young mistress will be unable to let this go. After all, second younger sister took her son as a fool. How would she be content to let this go? Rest assured, the Xia family's second young mistress is also not an ordinary person. This time we'll be able to enjoy a good show. Lian Xiao thought about it. According to Fifth Yang, Master will marry young Miss into the Li family. Miss has probably made plans long ago. What is there to be afraid of? Zhang Ruan indifferently said. If the Xia family does not say anything, Eighth Prince will not take the initiative to negotiate with the Li family regarding this. Even if father wishes to personally settle this with the Li family himself, Li Dong is not that easy to dismiss. Moreover, after this period of time, I am afraid that Li Yang does not have the fortune to marry a foreign anymore. Lian Xiao was frightened. Looking at Zhang Ruan's increasingly cold expression, her heart abruptly skipped a beat, yet she still lowered her head and pondered silently. Zhang Ruan laughed. The Xia family personally invited me to their residence, but it was mother who prepared a big gift for me. I myself have a huge present to give them too. Lian Xiao raised her head to look at her, miss. Regarding Li Dong's matter, I must still trouble the Xia family's eldest young mistress for a trip, she said. Then she pulled out a letter from her bosom and passed it to Lian Xiao. Find a chance to stuff this onto eldest Xia young mistress' body. Although Lian Xiao did not understand, she still accepted it and nodded. Zhang Ruan gave a half-smile. Currently, the Xia family's manner was in turmoil. Now it was time for Shen Rou and Xia Tiankai to have their ending. The beautiful and touching eldest Xia young mistress and second Xia young master, who was filled with limitless romance and amour, sister-in-law and brother-in-law. Zhang Ruan wondered whether Shen Rou would be extremely shocked upon seeing the letter. However, this chess piece would be better used when taken out later. Zhang Ruan's gaze contained some regret. It is still raining today. Indeed, Lian Xiao complied with her words and added on, it has yet to stop. Rain during the spring season should not have lasted for so long. It was getting closer and closer to the day of being exiled from the Xiaofu and returning to the capital. The very next day, early in the morning, Xiacheng really did order people to prepare the horses and the carriages. He had a demeanor of wanting to chase someone out. There were rumors that last night Xiaofuran woke up and begged Xiacheng for a long time, but it still did not make Xiacheng change his mind. Perhaps it was because he was so full of anger that he even vented his anger on Xiaofuran. Therefore, the scene of their departure was extremely different from their arrival. Not one Xia family member was present to send them off. At this, Zhang Li was naturally upset and Zhang Susu and the other two had ashen faces. Zhang Dan, as usual, silently kept to the corner, completely unfazed by the type of atmosphere they were in, and Zhang Ruan stood alone. Before returning to the Jiangfu, Zhang Quan had long heard from Xia Yan's messenger about the whole situation, from beginning to end. Although he was furious that Zhang Susu had not only failed in her scheme, but had even further ruined things for them, he was even more furious at the fact that the Xia family did not bother to leave them any face. When Xiacheng had yet to ascend the title, he would always try to curry favors with that son-in-law of his, Zhang Quan. Now that he had his title, he started putting on airs around them. He had also heard that Li Yang was looking to hire famous doctors at a high price these few days. Presumably, the Li family's son's life was saved. However, this made things more difficult to handle. Thinking about everything, Zhang Quan felt only a headache. Seeing him like this, the manservant by his side comforted him. "My lord, you have not rested for a whole night. Do you want to take a rest?" Zhang Quan waved his hand. At this moment he was too hard-pressed. How could he be in the mood to rest? The manservant, seeing the situation, continued in a low whisper, "Come to think of it, it is rather strange that ever since eldest young Miss returned to the Fu, there has not been a period of time when bad news has stopped coming in." He spoke while stealing glances at Zhang Quan's expression. Upon hearing this, Zhang Quan's whole body went stiff. His whole person seemed to be stupefied for a moment and he gradually creased his eyebrows. An instant later, he suddenly harshly beat the table. "She is indeed like a cursed star. Sha Xing. It's like a star sign. But this star's meaning is calamity and catastrophe. It is the star of doom. Therefore, it can be used as an expletive similar to saying harbinger of death." The manservant was frightened and so he retreated to the side and stopped speaking. But Zhang Quan suddenly thought more. When Zhao Mei died, a wandering Taoist monk who was passing by helped Zhang Ruan calculate her fortune. He said that she was an inauspicious person, and she was born with the fate of bringing misfortune to her husband and mother. It was only that Zhang Quan was not an overly superstitious person and didn't care much about ghosts and superstitions. Except that, during this time Zhao Mei had just passed away not long ago and Xiacheng had just succeeded the title. He had advised and asked when Zhang Quan would promote Xia Yan to the position of the main wife. Back then, he also had the heart to do such a thing as he felt that by being the Shu daughter and son, Zhang Susu and Zhang Chao had suffered for so many years for no apparent reason. Therefore, he had complied with the Taoist monk's words and sent Zhang Ruan to the countryside residence. Primarily, to allow Xia Yan to ease her mind and secondly, due to the fact that he couldn't stand the sight of Zhang Ruan. As long as he did not see Zhang Ruan, he would not be reminded of the irritating Zhao Mei. Now that the manservant had helped him remember, Zhang Quan suddenly reacted. Ever since Zhang Ruan had returned to Fu, Jiangfu had indeed been in constant turmoil. First it was Zhang Susu who had inexplicably lost her reputation, then Zhang Chao also fell from grace and his finger was cut off by someone. Lastly, the Zhang family not only had to deal with a conflict with the Li family, now even the Xia family bore a grudge against them. All of these situations seemed to be slightly related to Zhang Ruan. However, based on her own ability, it was impossible that she had caused all of this. She did not have that type of scheming mind or the underhanded methods. Still, this whole matter was strange, the only logical explanation being, just as that Taoist monk had said, she was genuinely the bane of others' existence. Zhang Quan clenched his fist tightly. He originally thought that with this extra daughter, he would have a bargaining chip that could be used in some manner to help his beloved Xia Yan, Zhang Susu and Zhang Chao. Who knew that she would turn out to be like an evil spirit wanting their lives? Since it was so, he could only get rid of her. The manservant had followed Zhang Quan for many years and upon seeing his expression, quietly left the room and walked out without being asked to. After Zhang Ruan returned to Ruanju, the first thing she did was to dismiss the few servants that Xia Yan had previously sent to her. She said, "Since mother has allowed me to send all of you back, you can all return to Yanhua Yuan by yourselves now." A few of the servant girls looked at each other in blank dismay, and one of them said with courage, "Eldest young miss, Foreign has let this servant come here to serve you. Thus this servant wishes to follow you." Yet, Zhang Ruan acted as if she had not heard her words and assigned a task for Lian Xiao to do. "Oh, by the way, when you have time, make a trip to the Xiaofu and help me put Xu Xiang's body in a coffin. After all, she served me before and should not fall to such a state that she is not even given a proper burial and just left to feed the wolves." On hearing this, some of the servant girls were shocked. Then they looked to Zhang Ruan's side and indeed, there was no sign of Xu Xiang. They only heard Lian Xiao say, "This servant shall save you the effort." Xu Xiang's death was horrible, but miss, please do not take it to heart. It was all her own actions that led to this end. Zhang Ruan smiled and looked towards the few servant girls, asking, "What did you say just now?" "Nothing much," that servant girl hurriedly replied. She lowered her head and no longer dared to look at Zhang Ruan. Zhang Ruan herself was left feeling pleased. In Yanhua Yuan, Xia Yan, who was weary from the journey, had just entered the room when Li Momo came over and said, "Foreign, Wan Kai from master's side has something to report. Let him enter." While receiving the tea from Lin Lang, Xia Yan sat down on a carved wooden chair. Wan Kai entered and said to Xia Yan, "Foreign?" Xia Yan waved her hand. "If you have something to say, get straight to the point. What is the progress of the thing I asked you to do?" Only then did Wan Kai nod his head and said, "It is already settled. Master believes that eldest young miss is the bane of others' existence, but he doesn't know what to do as of now." There was a ghost of a cold smile on Xia Yan's lips. "Since it is so, go tell Laoi that there will be a wandering Taoist monk, who is very gifted and proficient, coming to the capital in a few days. Many things have happened to the Jiangfu in these few days. I invited this master to come here to perform a ritual for us, to get rid of the bad luck in the Fu." An idea formed in Wan Kai's mind. "This servant understand. You may return." Xia Yan waved her hand wearily. After Wan Kai left, Li Momo came forward to help Xia Yan massage her shoulders. She said, "Foreign, we are going to use the same method we used last time. We must find an excuse after all." Xia Yan narrowed her eyes in a smile. "Many things have happened in the Jiangfu these past few days. Thus, if we can push everything onto Zhang Ruan, everyone's gaze will then stop always being on Sewer and Chower. On the contrary, Zhang Ruan's reputation will be ruined for eternity. This is also the best way to clean Sewer and Chower reputations." Li Momo also smiled. "Foreign is wise. No matter how brilliant eldest young miss is, it would be hard for her to fight against the widespread rumors, which will confuse the public on the rights and wrongs. Furthermore, Master already feels suspicious about her, so we can simply carry this out confidently. In order to prove that the words are not false, in a few days it is old Madam's longevity celebration. Arrange for the Taoist monk to pray for good fortune for old Madam as well. If we prove that Zhang Ruan is a curse in front of everyone, then she can forget about having a comeback again in this lifetime." Xia Yan slowly said. "But Foreign, do we still look for the same monk from 5 years ago?" Li Momo asked. The hand that Xia Yan was using to press her temples paused. She laughed viciously. "Naturally, the words of people whom you have come across before are the most persuasive. 5 years ago I was able to send her to the countryside residence. 5 years from then, of course I will still be able to do the same. It was only that 5 years ago, Laoi asked me to hide that matter. Now I want everyone in this world to know that Zhang Ruan is the bane of others' existence, and is also a jinx to her mother and future husband." 5 years ago, in order to find an extremely good excuse to send Zhang Ruan to the countryside residence, she bribed a Taoist monk to make Zhang Ruan's birthdate characters align with an inauspicious cursed star. She originally wanted Zhang Ruan to die in the countryside residence, yet she did not expect her to live well and even return to the capital early. She already had a hidden trick up her sleeves, just in case things did not go smoothly, and she would then ruin Zhang Ruan with it. After all, Zhang Ruan had made Zhang Susu suffer, and would not get away with it. A few years back, Wan Kai had already started doing things for Xia Yan, and putting casual advice into Jiang Quan's ears was an easy job. Moreover, Jiang Quan was already extremely unhappy with Jiang Ruan, and with a slight wind, the grass would waver and the first person he would suspect would definitely be Jiang Ruan. Botzi. The character 8/birthdate characters use a person's date of birth, based on the lunar calendar, the time of birth and how the stars align for fortune-telling purposes. No matter how Jiang Ruan would try to scheme, it would still be the same. The reason being she could not gain Jiang Quan's affections, and thus was destined to never have a winning chance in this battle. Old Jiang Madam had just regained consciousness a few days ago, and after nourishing her body, she was better. However, when one has reached the later stage of their life, one's health and vitality couldn't be compared to their younger days and bouts of illness were normal occurrences. It had only been a few days, yet she had grown wan and sallow by quite a fair bit. There were even signs of aging in her complexion. Duwan carried the bowl of medicine in and gave a look to Kai Kei, who was keeping watch over old Jiang Madam. Kai Kei hurriedly stood up and smiled at old Jiang Madam, who was lost in thought while looking outside the window. She said, "Old Madam, drink the medicine while it is warm." Old Jiang Madam retracted her gaze and looked at Duwan's bowl of medicine. She coldly said, "What's the point of still drinking medicine when I can tell that everyone in this fu can't wait for me to die to be happy?" Kai Kei jumped in shock and hastily said, "Old Madam, where do these words come from? Everyone is hoping that you'll live a long life. For second young master you have to be healthy." Chower. Old Jiang Madam's gaze suddenly deepened. "He has his mother's nature. I thought he was good at first, but now he is arrogant and conceited. He is exactly the same as his younger sister. Both are shallow." Kai Kei was stunned. Old Madam criticized both Jiang Chao and Jiang Su like that in front of them, and they did not know how to continue the conversation. Old Jiang Madam glanced at Kai Kei and stretched out her hand to take the bowl of medicine from Duwan's tray herself. She raised her head and drank the whole bowl of medicine till the last drop, and because the medicine was truly too bitter, she tightly shut her eyes and furrowed her brows. Only after a while did her expression gradually relax. "Old Madam, your birthday celebration is in a few days, and Foreign says that she wants to personally organize the event for you." Duwan, seeing her expression ease up, then carefully said, "It is only a disguise to deceive people." Old Jiang Madam coldly snorted. "Does she think that I do not know what ideas she has in her mind?" Kai Kei and Duwan looked at each other in blank dismay. Old Jiang Madam was usually strictly self-restrained. However, after she fell ill this time, it was as if she had become a new person, especially with her being extremely unsatisfied with Xia Yan and the other two. They only heard old Jiang Madam say again, "But I am afraid that her plans will be in vain. Eldest young miss is no simple person." Kai Kei and Duwan both lowered their heads and remained silent, but they had their own opinions in their hearts. For the next few days, there was the pitter-patter of drizzle in the capital's center, and the gray clouds seemed to never leave the capital city's skies. The dry food that the rich family's fu stored was starting to grow moldy from the humid weather, and needless to say, for the poor families too. The capital city's newly built top scorer's fu was washed by the rainwater till it was shiny and gleaming. Even if the weather was gloomy, it could not dispense the great amount of joy present in the Lu Fu. In the study room, Lu Min was standing at the window, staring at the water droplets that were dripping from the ledge, deep in his thoughts. The capital city had not rained like this for some time, and although it did not seem like heavy rain, it kept pitter-pattering non-stop. The water level of the reservoir that protected the river from flooding had risen quite a bit. Even if it was the newly renovated top scorer's fu, while staying at home, one could still feel a trace of cold dampness. The servant girl behind him considerately offered him a cup of ginger tea. "Young master, drink some to warm your body up." Lu Min turned around and accepted the cup of tea from the servant girl's hands. He gently took a sip. Though he was not old, he still possessed a profound and distinct arrogance. Compared to the impulsive sons of the rich families in the capital city, he was like a piece of smooth, pure and pleasantly cool green jade. Looking at him caused others to feel admiration from the bottom of their hearts. He asked, "These few days, did you receive any letters for me?" The servant girl was dazed and shook her head. "There is no letter." Immediately, a flash of disappointment passed over Lu Min's face. Ever since he was appointed as the top scorer in the imperial examination, He had never heard from that mysterious person again. At this moment, Lu Foran hastily walked in, holding a bronze invitation and said, "Ah Min, why are you wearing such worn-out clothes?" Lu Min smiled and shook his head. Seeing the invitation in her hand, he asked, "Mother, what is this?" "The foreign of the capital's Minister Jiang has sent an invitation, inviting us to their old madam's longevity birthday celebration." Lu Foran hesitated. "I originally wanted to reject it, but now that you have entered into officialdom, having someone to look after you would be good. This invitation is written clearly. It is our first time going to a gathering in the capital city, and it should be safe for us to pay a special visit to them." Mother has pondered over it. This is only a longevity birthday celebration and going there would be harmless. She appeared to have thought of something more and suddenly laughed. "Furthermore, there will definitely be a lot of prominent young ladies attending this celebration. If you see one that catches your attention, Mother will help you take note. You have grown quite old. You should start caring about the most important event in your life." "Mother," Lu Min was somewhat helpless. "This child only wants to establish his career. I have no wish to get married." "Nonsense," Lu Foran glared at him. "Mother still wants to carry a grandchild." After speaking, she looked at Lu Min again and asked, "But Minner, do you think Mother should go to the longevity birthday celebration or not?" Looking at his mother's expectant gaze, how could he bear to refuse her? Lu Min laughed. "Since Mother wishes to go, naturally you should go." Chapter 74. 1. Chapter 74. 1. While crowds gathered at the door of the city East District official, the resplendently dressed man and his wife pushed a bag into the hands of the kind-hearted old monk. "This one is grateful that Great Master is willing to exorcise our Fu. Although these are merely worldly possessions, Great Master may find them useful when you want to build a golden Buddha." Dong Yuan Y. This is a type of minister or official whose rank is bought, usually the rich people, by the title, but they do not have authority like appointed ministers. Their position at times means that they act as landlords and/or as a local overseer. Golden Buddha. Statues of Buddha covered in slash made out of gold, made to show off wealth. The grander the Buddha, the grander the temple. That monk had a head full of white, eyebrows long and wispy, hands held together in acknowledgement. Ba. A crowd of people had gathered, joining in the fun, as they gossiped and pointed at the monk, who was the famous Great Master Huiju, said to know both the past and the future. He'd only arrived in the capital a few days prior and was already heralded for often helping the wealthy with prayers and exorcisms, which appeared to be extremely effective. After Great Master Huiju received the bag, he excused himself from everyone and walked away alone, then turned away from the busy street into a dark and narrow alleyway where there was a small house. He walked up to the door and knocked, and a child soon opened the door and bade him to enter. After Huiju entered the courtyard, the small disciple reported, "Master, a few guests have arrived." Guests? The monk was surprised. After all, he didn't know many people in the capital. Although he didn't understand, he still entered with a calm expression. In the hall stood a young girl in green, dressed like a servant. That servant girl in green smiled when she saw him. Huiju stared blankly, then heard a smooth voice come from behind the servant girl, "Great Master." Huiju looked over and saw the silhouette of a girl emerge from the shadows. The servant girl in green stepped aside. As light shone through, the silhouette soon revealed its features. This was a fresh young lady, about the same age as the servant girl in green. She wore a red mandarin-collared top that was embroidered with swastikas in white thread, and a skirt decorated with flowers, so good-looking even the shadows couldn't conceal it. She smiled slightly at Huiju, as if facing a friend of many years, a pair of slightly raised eyes bright and moist, yet they inexplicably gave a sense that no one could see through her. 1 Zbu Duan 2 refers to a specific type of repeating pattern. "This young miss is?" Huiju asked in a low voice. The girl in front of him was unfamiliar to him in every way. "Although Great Master doesn't know me, I've long heard of Great Master's famous deeds. Today, I've come to ask Great Master about my birthdate characters," she said. "Miss is still young, why come alone to ask for a divination?" Huiju asked. "Life is rough, the road ahead unknown." Zhang Ruan only spoke these 7 words. Huiju stared blankly, thought for a while and said, "Then miss, please write your birthdate characters." Zhang Ruan picked up the brush and began writing. When she lifted the brush, Huiju was also quietly observing her. Looking at this young lady with such excellent mannerisms, she must be some wealthy family's young miss. Therefore, upon considering this pair when they first arrived, this young miss and the servant at her side, after a quick moment he had made a decision to swindle her. However, while he still couldn't quite ascertain her intentions, he could see that there was a bit of an evil aura in her expression. Zhang Ruan pushed the finished paper with her birthdate characters towards Huiju. "Great master, please take a look." Huiju spread the paper, lifted his prayer beads from his neck without a word. After an hour, his brows gradually furrowed. With Luzhu watching, Zhang Ruan smilingly asked, "Great master, what are your thoughts?" Huiju gazed at Zhang Ruan unspeaking for a while, shook his head, then let out a heavy sigh. Great master can say. In contrast to his distressed mien, Zhang Ruan instead looked carefree, as if the divination calculations were being done for someone else. Huiju said, "Miss Future is ominous. I'm afraid you bear the sign of the cursed star." Cursed star. While Zhang Ruan chewed over these 3 words, Huiju lowered his brows, looking like a compassionate bodhisattva. He then heard Zhang Ruan say, "Great master sees clearly. I am indeed born under the cursed star. My mother died like this in front of my eyes, my elder brother is missing, and there's no end to strange happenings in my household." Her voice was dispirited, sorrowful. Huiju opened his mouth to speak. "Though I've said this, Miss doesn't need to worry. This old monk has a way to rewrite your fate. Miss, take heart. This old monk will visit your household in a few days and discuss it with your relatives." "Why would Great Master help me?" Zhang Ruan asked. Huiju lowered his head. Hands clasped. "Umitba. Compassion is the responsibility of all Buddhist monks. Great Master is truly kind. Not all monks are like Great Master. For instance, I have heard stories that a monk from Yuzhou, under the banner of an eminent monk, has been swindling others, and has amassed quite the sum." Hearing Yuzhou, Huiju's 2 hands trembled slightly. He heard Zhang Ruan's warm voice continue, "This monk is a fox. He was adopted by a wandering monk as a child, and this wandering monk was the one who taught him his tricks. The wandering monk used him to make money at every turn, but after the monk learned all those tricks and grew up, he personally killed the wandering monk and told everyone his master passed away. He then inherited the wandering monk's possessions and continued to be a great master of deception." Talking up till now, she paused, then said, "By the way, that monk from Yuzhou, his Dharma name is exactly the same as Great Master's. I don't know if you've heard this story, Huiju? Faheo, name in religion of Buddhist or Taoist within monastery." Huiju was as stiff as wood, feeling cold sweat roll down his back. He'd never told these secrets to anyone, and it happened so many years ago. This girl hadn't even been born then, so why was she so clear on those past events? He raised his head and saw that the girl opposite to him had a playful smile on her face. Where did all her sadness go? Huiju heard his raspy voice reply, "This old monk has never heard this story. Many things occur in the world. Great Master wouldn't necessarily have heard it all. I've heard about some interesting events and can tell Great Master about them. For example, the young boy who let us in earlier reminds me that in the story, that monk was once swindling a household that had a daughter who was very beautiful. The young miss got pregnant and yet wouldn't reveal the identity of the child's father even at the risk of death, though in the end she passed away due to complications in childbirth. Her family wanted to discard the weak infant, but the hypocritically compassionate monk proposed to accept the child as a disciple. The young miss's family was naturally happy, but didn't know that the child was actually the monk's blood-related son." After hearing this, Huiju held onto his calm expression by a thread. He was already soaked in cold sweat, and felt anxious all over. After the infant was given to the monk, because his weak health required many expensive herbs, the monk was helpless and could only intensify his money-making schemes. However, Yuzhou is only so big, thus he came to the prosperous imperial capital. The capital has many wealthy people, and after he made a name for himself and made a lot of money, he could take his son to see a physician. Zhang Ruan smiled coldly. "Great Master, What do you think of this story? Who are you? Huiju asked. Facing the young miss in front of him, he couldn't see through her at all, but thought that she had been ordered by some higher authority to see through him. Otherwise, for a completely unfamiliar stranger to speak of these secrets that he had long buried in his heart to never see the light of day would be too shocking. For the first time in his life, Huiju, who played with people in the palm of his hand, felt that things were out of his control. Zhang Ruan quietly looked at him. I'm just carrying the cursed star. Huiju, you currently have two choices. 1. Kill me, and your secret won't spread further. Or 2. Listen to my orders and I'll protect this secret for you. Her bearing was calm, not worried about the future at all, as if she had long known Huiju's answer. Huiju looked at her. A sense of hatred arose in his heart. He asked, how do you know these things? Huiju, you want to save your son? Zhang Ruan didn't answer his question. Son. Huiju held himself stiffly. The thin thread of hatred dissipated into nothing in an instant as he thought of his bedridden son. The physician said the child had birth defects that if not treated with a rare medicine, the body would be very frail. He had been a fake monk for all these years, and never thought he would have a son at his old age. He definitely wanted to save his son. How? Huiju asked. If you follow my orders, I guarantee that you won't have to worry about food or clothing for a lifetime. Your son will receive treatment from the best physicians. And you also won't have to worry about paying for the rare medicine. Finally, you won't have to travel everywhere living in fear. Her charming eyes were astonishing. Her words bewitching. You will be revered by thousands, have wealth beyond measure and long-term safety. You will become the most eminent monk. You will become the state preceptor. Huiju was almost taken in by her words, but he hadn't spent those years of deception in vain. In this aspect he was particularly sensitive. He very quickly regained his senses and said, Miss, you're taking this old monk for a joke. I don't know what young miss really came for, but I am only an ordinary monk, not worthy of the title of eminent monk, and am helpless in many things. Zhang Ruan calmly looked at him and smilingly said, Know the past, know the future? Those are all in the past. It seems like I still need to prove something to you. Huiju said nothing. Tonight, mischievous ghosts will strike at the prefectural magistrate's fu. Tomorrow morning, they will definitely invite you to visit, Zhang Ruan said. Huiju couldn't believe his ears. Miss, it doesn't matter whether you believe me or not. If you want to save your son, then do as I say, Zhang Ruan said. 10 days later is the longevity birthday celebration of old Madam of Minister Zhang's fu. I want you to go there a day before and pray for her good fortune, and coincidentally find that there are evil spirits present because the fu's second young miss is bearing the sign of the cursed star. She smiled thinly. Great master is very skilled. There's no need for me to say more. How are you so sure I will come on that day? Huiju couldn't help but ask. Zhang Ruan stood up. Didn't I say earlier, know the past, know the future? With her back to the light, she had a gentle expression, beautiful face, and bright red clothing, yet it made others feel cold. She was really a devil hiding beneath a beautiful face, a demonic temptress. Zhang Ruan brought the servant girl to the door, then suddenly had a thought and turned to say, I forgot to mention my name is Zhang Ruan, the eldest daughter of the capital's Zhang family. Leaving the dark alleyway, Lu Zhu looked at Zhang Ruan's expression and cautiously stated, Miss is certain that monk will come in 10 days. Of course he'll come. Huiju treated his son as preciously as his own life. Every spring, his son's condition was aggravated by the weather. In her past life, Xianli had used this weakness and lured Huiju to his side by offering to help him cure his son's disease in a few years, and thus earned the man's loyalty. Huiju was indeed talented. He followed Xianli to become the state preceptor, and cooked up many schemes for 8th prince. In this life she would rather sow discord, taking this opportunity before Xianli could claim Huiju for his own use. Oh, it was now the spring festival, and Huiju considered his son's situation. After reflecting on her words, it was hard to be unmoved. Everyone in the world had their soft spots, which once found could be used to handle them at will. Come to think of it, it was thanks to Xianli in her past life, who in order to mold her into a competent pawn told her all these secrets without reservation. Otherwise it's hard to imagine how difficult it would be to conquer such sly people like Hui Ju. Chapter 74. 2. Chapter 74. 2. Lu Zhu said, "It's all thanks to Fifth Yang for raising this topic. That this Yan Hua Yuan's pair of mother and daughter could think of such a despicable scheme is really too evil." Previously, on the evening they returned to the Fu, Hong Ying hurriedly made a trip to Ruanju, saying Jiang Quan wanted to invite a Taoist priest to old Madame's longevity birthday celebration in order to expel all the evil spirits and negative energy in the Fu. Though she didn't explain everything explicitly, she casually mentioned that the Taoist priest was the same wandering priest who divined Zhang Ruan's future 5 years ago. Finally, Hong Ying said, "Old Madame's longevity birthday celebration is a big event. Nothing can go wrong. Eldest Miss should also prepare in advance." Zhang Ruan thanked her with a smile, and repaid her kindness by accidentally mentioning the crack in the relationship between the Xiaofu and the Jiangfu. Jiang Quan wasn't completely satisfied with Xia Yan, and there was Hong Ying waiting to provide comfort. Zhang Ruan only spoke a little, but Hong Ying was a smart person, and with a thin smile she easily thought of ways to take advantage of the situation. 5 years ago. Actually, it should be said to be in her last life, because Jr was stupid. She was like putty in Xia Yan's hands, but if Xia Yan wanted to repeat the events of that time it wouldn't be so simple anymore. Lu Zhu looked ahead. Miss Lin's carriage has arrived. Zhang Ruan turned around and indeed saw a carriage stopped at the gates. Lin Zixiang hopped down from the carriage, saw Zhang Ruan and sternly said, "Why are you so slow, making me wait?" Zhang Ruan laughingly replied, "I wasted some time on the way over, let's go in to take a look." Old Zhang Madame's longevity birthday celebration was imminent, but Zhang Ruan had no desire to personally make a gift. After greeting Xia Yan, she left again with Lin family's Lin Zixiang. Xia Yan naturally had no way of rejecting Lin Zixiang's invitation on behalf of Zhang Ruan, and when she thought of how Zhang Susu's face was scarred and couldn't leave the house, her heart was filled with resentment yet had no way to vent it. As soon as they stepped inside the rouge shop, they heard a crisp voice ring out, "Hey Zixiang, Ruan Mimi, I've waited for a long time for you to arrive." Dong Yinger greeted them warmly, whereas Zhao Jin on the side was a bit helpless. "The smell of perfume is so strong I almost puked. Let's get out of here." Dong Yinger pulled on Zhao Jin's hand. "Didn't you just arrive? I say, Jiner, you're almost an adult, but you still don't know how to dress yourself up. Acting like a child. I'm worried your future husband won't like it." Zhao Jin was born into a military family, so naturally she looked down on the ladies with makeup caked on, but Dong Yinger was being annoying again. Zhang Ruan smiled, "We've already shopped at so many cosmetic stores, but I heard a new jewelry store that opened in the city has a lot of exotic treasures. In addition to gold and silver jewelry, they have a collection of high-grade swords and weapons. Does Zhao Jie want to take a look?" Zhao Jin hurriedly replied, "Ruan Mimi, is that true? You better not be messing with me." Zhang Ruan smiled in reply, "How would I dare?" Dong Yinger was curious, and upon hearing the news she said, "Then Ruan Mimi, let's go take a look. I want to buy a pair of pretty bracelets." Lin Zixiang also thought it was a good idea. So the group boarded a carriage and went into town. When the carriage stopped, Dong Yinger was the first to jump down, followed by Zhang Ruan and the others. They saw a pagoda of stone, with a plaque reading Yibao Pavilion in large characters. As the group entered the building, a pretty maidservant led them in, explaining, "The first floor has precious jewelry, and the second floor has precious weapons. I wonder what these misses are looking for." Jewelry. Weapons. Dong Yinger and Zhao Jin shouted at the same time, making Dong Yinger pin Zhao Jin with her stare. "You have to go against me, huh? You know I normally don't look at that stuff. Why don't we split up and meet up later?" Zhao Jin suggested. Lin Zixiang said, "Let's do that, I'll stay and look at the jewelry as well, it's not like I understand weaponry." "Ruan Mimi, what about you?" "Of course Ruan Mimi will stay with us," Dong Yinger interrupted. However, Zhang Ruan shook her head, "I want to take a look at the weapons." The weapons? Not to mention Dong Yinger and Lin Zixiang, even Zhao Jin was shocked. With a disbelieving tone she said, "You don't practice martial arts? Why are you interested in weapons?" Zhang Ruan smiled sadly. "Ever since my eldest brother went missing after joining the military, and with no further news about his return, I thought that if he could come back, he would be a valiant and strong young man and it would be appropriate to match him with a good weapon. Carelessly she continued. But it's only taking a look. The others were all moved when they heard her words. Zhao Jin said, I know a bit about weapons, thus, once we go up I may be able to give some advice. Zhang Ruan smiled back. The two arrived on the second floor, and as the maidservant had said, there were many high-grade weapons. Some were polished to the point that they shined radiantly while some showcased many years of history, that as soon as one entered they would be blinded by the magnificence. Zhao Jin soon exclaimed, there are actually so many treasures. Zhang Ruan glanced at her. Zhao Jin touched a sword placed on a pedestal and instantly felt shock. She hurriedly stepped back and said excitedly, it really is special. Though Zhang Ruan wasn't nearly as excited as Zhao Jin, she looked around, spotting a fire cloud moonshield that looked particularly suited to Zhang Xing. If he had such armor, he would be much safer on the battlefield. However, when she looked at the price marked below, she instantly had a headache. Don't mention how all her money was used to buy up the capital's grain. Even if she had the funds on hand, it still wouldn't be enough. She continued onwards, and her eye was drawn towards a blue thing that turned out to be an exquisitely made bracelet. The blue light emitted was beautiful. When Zhang Ruan placed it on her wrist, the bracelet made her white hands look even more delicate. Zhao Jin walked over and said in a confused tone, how come this floor also has jewelry? The maidservant of the jewelry shop who followed them explained, this is the blood moon bracelet it's used for. Before she could get her words out, she saw Zhang Ruan skillfully press on the protruding flower pattern while aiming at her. Young miss, the servant girl exclaimed, her face white. I won't press on it. Zhang Ruan took off the bracelet. How many needles are inside? 9 needles, the maidservant stiffly explained, but they are all coated in deadly poison. Zhao Jin was a bit shocked when she saw Zhang Ruan's actions. Only when the maidservant explained did she understand. So it has hidden mechanisms. She turned to Zhang Ruan. Ruan Mimi normally doesn't see these things, even I didn't know how to use it. How did you know? Judging by how precise Zhang Ruan's actions were, it didn't seem like her first time seeing it. Zhang Ruan smiled thinly. This sort of bracelet was mentioned in one of the books that belonged to my mother's collection. Zhao Jin nodded her head. So it's like this. But these things can only be counted as hidden weapons. I'm still more interested in that sword. Zhang Ruan stretched out a finger to stroke the table's polished surface, her eyes suddenly deep. In her past life, Jiang Quan sourced a similar bracelet for Jiang Susu. And at the time Jiang Susu wore it day in day out. Zhang Ruan was so envious, but she could never pluck up the courage to ask Jiang Quan for another one. She could only pretend that the silver bracelet on her wrist had the same function, touch it occasionally, and lie to herself that it also had a hidden mechanism. Today seemed like a dream. The blood moon bracelet in her hands was even more beautiful than the one Jiang Susu had, and could also hold more needles. The maidservant further explained that the needles could be pulled back with thin silk thread after being shot, and when adding on the poison, it would be very suitable to keep by her side. However, Zhang Ruan shook her head and put the bracelet back. Miss doesn't like it? The maidservant had observed that Zhang Ruan liked the bracelet a lot, so it was surprising that she had put it back. I don't have that much silver. Zhang Ruan smiled reluctantly. She could only endure this pain. Me too. Zhao Jin couldn't tear her eyes away from the sword. Hopefully I can convince my father. The two shared a smile. After looking around for a while more, they headed downstairs to find the others. After showing them out, the maidservant who followed them walked to the rear wall of the room and pressed on a porcelain lion's head. A small hidden door opened, leading to an elegant side room. Being so close, it was easy to hear the conversations from the other room clearly. Young master, the maidservant respectfully greeted. Eldest Zhang Miss picked out this blood moon bracelet. Saying so, she presented the tray. The young man sitting in the side room grunted in reply. Without even turning his head, he ordered, "Pack it away." Yes. The servant girl silently withdrew. The young man sat before the window. Soft rain caught the capital in a haze, yet it couldn't obstruct people's sight. A moment later, Zhang Ruan's group boarded a carriage and slowly left. Coming out with Dong Yinger and others was to choose a present for old Madame's longevity birthday celebration. But in the end Zhang Ruan didn't buy anything. Dong Yinger curiously asked, "You're going back empty-handed?" "I don't have the silver." Zhang Ruan smiled gently. Dong Yinger never thought the daughter of a minister would suffer like this. The three girls sympathized with her and wanted to lend some money but worried it would hurt her self-esteem, so they could only comfort her with words. But looking at Zhang Ruan, remembering how her mother died young and her father treated her coldly, the pity in their hearts deepened. Zhang Ruan didn't care how the three looked at her, calmly returning to the Fu with Lu Zhu. On the road back, Lu Zhu asked, "Miss, you're really not going to buy anything?" "Where would I find the silver?" Zhang Ruan added, "We're penniless. Rather, buying something cheap would only make people laugh their heads off." "Miss shouldn't have bought that much grain, it was way too much," Lu Zhu complained, lifting the carriage's curtain to look outside. "It's strange, the rain hasn't stopped for over 10 days. She thought for a while and said, "This servant thinks it would be good if the rain doesn't stop because then we can get a good price if we sell the grain Miss bought. But on the other hand, the capital will have a lot of refugees." Lu Zhu lamented, "It really makes people worry." Zhang Ruan silently laughed. As there were no plans to sell the grain, she was afraid Lu Zhu's hope for a windfall would fall to pieces. However, she wouldn't inform Lu Zhu of this just yet. She said, "I have no gifts to give for Zuma's longevity birthday celebration. Huiju is the best present." Lu Zhu rolled her eyes, chuckling. "Miss is right. This gift is bigger than any other. This servant can't wait for that day." When the two returned to the Fu's servants saw Zhang Ruan returning empty-handed, and some chatterboxes soon reported the matter to Yanhua Yuan. Jiang Susu was talking with Xia Yan. When she heard the news she said, "What a pauper, she went to buy things without any silver." Xia Yan frowned. "No matter what, you have to finish writing 100 longevity scripts. When you make your Zumu happy, your father's heart will also be more comfortable." "I know," Jiang Susu said impatiently. "We just don't know what Zhang Ruan is going to give. If nothing is prepared then we'll have a good show to watch." Xia Yan smiled slightly. It doesn't matter what gifts she prepares. Expending all her effort, it's impossible for her to receive old madam's favor. "Why?" Jiang Susu asked. "Who would like a person bearing the cursed star?" A flash of hatred revealed itself in Xia Yan's eyes. Furthermore, old Jiang madam had always believed in spirits and ghosts. Every year she would fork out a huge sum of money just to burn offerings. This sort of person considered all things spiritual to be sacred. Especially now that the Jiangfu had recently experienced so many strange events one after another, even if Jiang Quan wasn't old Jiang madam's blood-related son, they still had some affection for each other after so many years, and as old madam of the Jiang family she couldn't just sit back without doing anything. This time Zhang Ruan wouldn't be able to escape so easily. Jiang Susu observed Xia Yan and felt a little excited. She couldn't help but ask, "Mother already has an idea?" Xia Yan lovingly embraced her daughter, stroking her head. "You only need to know that everything your mother does is for you and Chower, so don't disappoint me." Jiang Susu snuggled up to Xia Yan and her beautiful eyes widened. The hate in them was enough to make people shudder in fear. "I know, Mother. I really can't wait for the day of Zuma's longevity birthday celebration." Chapter 75. 1. Chapter 75. 1. Time passed rapidly and soon 10 days had gone by. During this time the Jiangfu was extremely tranquil, as if the past events had used up all of the bad luck, and after the crisis everything had gradually stabilized. The only issue was that all those mishaps had cost the Jiangfu a fortune, and now the finances were tight. Jiangfu and Xia Yan, who looked after the whole residence, suggested cutting down on daily expenses. Furthermore, in order to pacify the servants, she also cut down the monthly allowance of a few young misses by more than half. Jiang Susu and Jiang Li naturally did not care about the monthly allowance, as they often received an extra allowance from Jiang Quan on a regular basis. However, Jiang Dan and Jiang Ruan did not have anyone to give them extra. Moreover, they usually had to reward the maidservants and old female servants in their courtyards from their own pockets. Therefore they had a hard life. The rain was continuous and did not stop. Ruanju had been a deserted courtyard that was hastily made available, and since the roof had not been repaired for many years the rainwater seeped through. The water flowed in through a hole in the roof and dripped into the house, making it extremely damp. Thus Lu Zhu found a metal pail from outside and put it under the hole so that temporarily, the rainwater would not splatter everywhere. However, the bitter and chilly wind that also entered through the hole was enough to make one feel cold. Bai Ji walked in saying, "This servant looked for old female servant Song a few days ago, asking her to find some people to fix the rooftop for Mississippi. However, that servant woman rejected it, saying that the Fu was busy with old madam's longevity birthday celebration these days and could not find time. Today is the birthday celebration, so this servant thought that everything should have been more or less prepared, but that servant woman still declined." Talking about this made even the usually good-tempered Bai Ji feel a trace of anger. "I think it is an order from the courtyard from that side." Zhang Ruan did not seem bothered. "You do not have to take it to heart. If they really wish for Miss to freeze till she falls sick," Lian Xiao continued furiously, "then they are really too despicable." Lu Zhu thought about it. Why not let this servant go outside to find a mason, as there is no reason to continue letting the roof remain unattended to? Where do we get the money to hire a mason? Zhang Ruan smiled chillingly. Since Xia Yan had cut down the Jiangfu's young Mrs. monthly allowance by more than half, even without thinking one would know what the purpose was. It would be good if not only did they not have enough taels to buy a birthday present, but could not even afford better quality ingredients. If today, at the longevity birthday celebration, they were unable to give a present to old Zhang Madam in front of everyone, they would lose their faces once and for all. Lu Zhu dejectedly said, "It really puts one in a difficult situation. There is no need to trouble yourselves with it because anyway after today there will be people coming to fix it themselves." Zhang Ruan walked towards her dressing table and sat down. "Help me dress up. I think a few guests have already arrived. Even if second younger sister is attending to them, I, as an older sister, cannot keep hiding in my room." Lian Xiao and Bai Ji looked at each other and their eyes were filled with laughter. Lian Xiao said, "This servant will definitely dress Miss up beautifully, and allow Miss to be comparable to second young Miss." In the side courtyard, Xia Yan was leading Jiang Susuan to talk to all the Furins and young misses. Those who came today were all females and all had some status in the court. Since the Shu daughter could not come out to entertain the guests, it was up to the mistress of the household and the first daughter to welcome all the Furins. Jiang Susu was wearing a piece of solid-colored clothing made from Hangzhou silk, with a winter white Chinese rose design on it and a V-neck collar. It was matched with a winding pale blue skirt with an indistinct moon woven with fine silk and gold threads on it. The clothing she wore had silvery white, satin borders and designs of zhaji flowers in gold all over the place. Her fine and soft beautiful hair was coiled up in a refined, distinguishable and unique way with a white jade hairpin in it. In her gently and meticulously tied cloud-like bun, there was a coil of pearls that looked as magnificent and beautiful as porcelain. On her smooth and glossy wrists, she also wore a bracelet of pure silver with patterns carved into it. On her waist was a jade pendant with a tassel hanging from her girdle along with a perfume sachet. She had on a pair of Baoxianghua patterned embroidered shoes with a flower pattern sewn onto the front. Her whole attire made her look pure, elegant and stunning. She did not put on a veil today and it was unknown what miraculous medicine she had used, but her scars were much better. There was a thick layer of cosmetic powder on her face which fully concealed the scars. At a glance, her skin was still considered fair and clear. However, because the powder was too thick, although she still looked tender and beautiful, she did not appear as elegant and attractive as her previous self, a fairy. An example of the satin border. Zheji flowers. They are flower designs with only a part of the branch in the design. A pair of Baoxianghua curled shoes. Baoxianghua aka treasured lotus flower, highly regarded during the Tang and Sui dynasty. It's seen as a lucky symbol and used to denote treasure and fairy. Its decorative drawing is like a blend of peony and lotus flowers. Baoxiang is also an honorific bestowed on Buddha, and thus we see Buddha at times with a lotus-like flower, and its drawings associated with Buddhism. Baoxiang flowers were widely used in brocades, bronze mirrors and porcelain decorations, with auspicious and happy meanings. The chief historian's foreign smiled. "This must be second young Mississippi. You have grown to be more exceptional that after a few more years, the number of people asking for your hand in marriage will soon break down your threshold." Jiang Susu was surprised. 2 red clouds immediately appeared on her face. She lowered her head and walked towards Xia Yan's side, as if she was embarrassed upon hearing what the foreign said just now. The assistant minister's foreign, who was born with a slightly severe-looking long face, squinted her eyes saying, "But I heard that second young miss fell into the waters a few days ago? How are you now?" All the Furens who were present had obviously heard of what happened on the ship during the Lantern Festival. Thinking of Jiang Susu's situation at that time, their gazes directed at Xia Yan and her daughter were different again. Xia Yan laughed. "Lao Foreign has wasted her efforts. Su'er only suffered some fright, she is fine now." However, Assistant Minister's Foreign did not let go. "Then how is second young master of the Fu? I heard that he did not perform well in the imperial examination and his finger was even cut off by someone. Young people must be able to take failures, just like the 2 in my family. They too did not do well, yet there's no difference in their daily routines." The 2 young masters of Assistant Minister Gao's Fu took the same examination as Zhang Chao, and they both received Gongyuan. Gongyuan, a title for those who perform well in the imperial examination. Although Xia Yan was smiling, the handkerchief in her hand was practically going to be ripped apart. This assistant minister's foreign was always so critical and harsh in her words. Jiang Susu was young, therefore. Her ability to conceal her feelings were not on par with Xia Yan's, and she yearned to go up and shut that foreign's mouth. The others in the hall were a little embarrassed. Just as the atmosphere became frigid, the foreign of the commander-in-chief's Fu, Gu Foreign, laughed. "What imperial examination are you talking about? Isn't the top scorer's mother right here?" After that she looked towards Lu Foreign, who was sitting quietly at the side without speaking. From the moment Lu Foreign had arrived, she was a bit cautious and reserved. Though she was not familiar with the upper-class social circle, it was fortunate that Lu Foreign was also a scholar's daughter, thus she was not lacking in manners or etiquette. Hearing what Gu Foreign said, she blushed a bit. "Foreign does not have to tease me. How can it be counted as teasing?" Xia Yan smiled along. Lu Foreign raised such a good son. The whole capital knows about the elegant demeanor of the top scorer. She spoke with such blatant sincerity. It was almost as if she was sincerely happy on behalf of Lu Foreign. With the elegant and graceful bearing of the Jiang Yuan. I wonder which family's daughter will have the fortune to marry Jiang Yuan in the future. Speaking of Lu Min, Lu Foreign became less reserved and laughed along upon hearing those words. Then, Gu Foreign looked like she had thought of something. "Speaking of which, eldest young miss of your family is older than second young miss by a few years. Is she engaged?" Unexpectedly, she is not. Xia Yan was stunned, and she looked probingly at Gu Foreign. "For what reason does Foreign ask about this?" "No reason," Gu Foreign laughed. "It is just that I have yet to see eldest young miss in the Fu, so I was curious." However, she had her own considerations. Ever since the Lantern Festival, Gui had often spoken of eldest Zhang. Mississippi Gui was the family's youngest son, and while most of his elder brothers were either with families or engaged, Gui was also not so young anymore. Furthermore, Zhang family was considered a rich and noble family, so if eldest Zhang Miss' character and morals were not bad, she could be considered. Just because of this, Gu Foreign had quickly accepted old Zhang Madam's longevity birthday celebration invitation. The young miss of Envoy Shu's family asked with curiosity, "Second Zhang Miss, why is your sister not here?" After all, Zhang Ruan was Zhang Fu's daughter, thus it was expected of her to come and greet all the Furens. Embarrassment flashed by Jiang Susu's face. "De Jejia doesn't come out often, but it is probably because there is no familiar face here." Her tone contained a trace of reverence. Naturally, this type of expression in the eyes of the public had a different meaning. Everyone couldn't help thinking that because Zhang Ruan had been sent to the countryside residence when she was quite young, she would certainly not be aware of any manners or rules. And now it seemed that she was also scared of facing strangers. As such, a negative image of a shallow and petty young lady appeared in their eyes. More so, upon seeing Jiang Susu's apprehensive look, all of the Furens present managed to infer the possibility that this Jiang Fu's eldest young miss was also tyrannical. Otherwise, why would second young miss appear so nervous? Just when they all were ruminating over these thoughts, they heard a crisp voice ring from outside the courtyard. "Miss, slow down, be careful not to fall." "If I am any slower, I would be slighting the guests," a gentle female voice replied. Following that, a red figure appeared. In a room full of young ladies and furins, this type of bright red was extremely dazzling. Zhang Ruan wore a round collared button-down robe with an intricately engraved begonia-colored brocade of the Shirshir Rui. She had on a floor-length 3-inlay 8-panel flare skirt with gold-coiled plum blossom and bamboo embroidery. On top of that, she had on a crimson cape with a cloud brocade of jasper lotus leaves cascading down and secured with an ivory clip. A soft ponytail was tied into a refined and unique inverted bun, and there was a begonia bracelet-like hair ornament with patterns carved into it, inserted in the thick hair. She wore a 3-inlay bracelet made of sardonyx, and she had tied a peacock-design corset on her waist. On top hung a bloomed red plum blossom design, fragrance sachet, and she wore a pair of soft-soled boots. Shirshir Rui, an auspicious design of 2 persimmons on a rui. Rui, curved decorative object that serves as either a ceremonial scepter in Chinese Buddhism, or a talisman symbolizing power and good fortune. She had not applied any powder today and only wore a thin layer of rouge on her cheeks. This made her exquisite and smooth skin appear extremely clear and radiant. She took step after step, walking in from outside the courtyard. However, her skirt did not move a single inch. Although she was relatively young, she was bewitchingly charming. All the furins present looked at her flabbergasted. They thought in their hearts, how was the Zhang family's daughter who had grown up in the wild improper? Look at that temperament, it was obviously of a noble person from the palace. Zhang Susu saw this scene and viciously twisted her handkerchief. She did not understand why Zhang Ruan, who had grown up in the countryside residence, would purposely have a temperament that was beyond words. Zhang Susu would usually be the one people knew whenever the Zhang family was mentioned. However, ever since Zhang Ruan had returned, one by one Zhang Ruan had become comparable to her. Even her beautiful face, which she took the most pride in, was no longer unparalleled. She scolded Zhang Ruan in her heart. Zhang Ruan was so young, yet every action of hers had the demeanor of a mature lady. Seeing this caused people to harbor dislike towards her. Only when Zhang Ruan walked to the front did Gu Furan smile. "You are Zhang Ruan." Ruan Yang greets the Commander-in-Chief's Furan. Zhang Ruan smiled and bowed to her. "How do you know that I'm the Commander-in-Chief's Furan?" Gu Furan was astonished. "I heard that the Commander-in-Chief has a soldierly bearing and is willing to sacrifice himself for the country, and that he has a loving marriage with his Furan." Ruan Yang noticed that the perfume sachet on Furan's waist has a shield design embroidered onto it instead of flowers and presumptuously guessed it. "It seems like I have made a mistake." Gu Furan laughed. "So it is like this. Zhang Furan, your daughter is truly both beautiful and intelligent." She saw that Zhang Ruan not only possessed a magnanimous attitude and extraordinary bearing, she was also remarkably intelligent, and therefore took an immediate liking to her. The only bad thing was that her appearance was too beautiful. After all, if she appeared so soul-stirring at such a young age, after a few years she would become a rare beauty. Being too beautiful was also not something good for fear that it may cause trouble. As she thought about this, all the other furins in the courtyard had already started conversing with this Zhang family's eldest young miss who had suddenly appeared. Zhang Ruan greeted them one by one. Her smile was warm, and although she could not hear what Zhang Ruan said, she was actually having a pleasant conversation with all the furins. Within a short span of time, she had gained a favorable impression in the hearts of many. Even the critical assistant minister's Furan, upon seeing Zhang Ruan, was unable to maintain a cold face. It was very likely that if Zhang Susu did not grit her teeth till it broke into pieces, the hatred in her heart would obviously be incessant. After a while, Kai Kei and Duwan supported old Madam out. Everyone present stood up to greet her. Old Zhang Madam smiled in reply. She looked very energetic and no longer showed the feebleness from the past few days she had spent on the sickbed. After seeing Zhang Ruan, a profound expression appeared in old Zhang Madam's eyes. Kai Kei then supported her to sit in the main seat of the hall. The furins present then began to give out their presents. Momo ordered a servant to keep all the presents to the side. Jiang Quan had also arrived, bringing Jiang Li and Jiang Dan with him. Jiang Chao was also following them, and upon seeing old Zhang Madam, he stepped forward and said, "Grandson wishes Zumu to live till a ripe age and be healthy and prosperous." He was wearing a blue robe and his whole demeanor appeared to be jubilant. There was not a trace of the gloomy look from a few days ago, and those who did not know began to be suspicious if the earlier rumors were actually true. Jiang Chao retrieved a wooden case that was as tall as a chair from behind him and passed it forward. "This is the gift that grandson has prepared." Everyone looked curiously at that wooden case, as old Jiang Madam smiled and ordered Kai Kei to open the box. Kai Kei followed her orders, and after opening the box, she carefully lifted a Buddha made of white jade out of the case. The Buddha was carved to look lifelike. The eyes and brows looked lively, as if it was alive. The most precious part was that it was carved from a whole square piece of white jade of the best quality. The Buddha carving was definitely not cheap. Everyone was astonished, and Jiang Chao said, "As soon as grandson saw this Buddha, I immediately found it familiar. After looking at it closely, I thought, isn't this Zumu? He's trying to say that his grandmother is like Buddha. Therefore grandson bought it. I only wish that Buddha will bless Zumu with good health." His words were cleverly thought of, and old Jiang Madam scolded with a smile, saying that I'm like Buddha. Nonsense. Jiang Li let out an unsightly sneer. Jiang Chao had all the methods at his fingertips when it came to currying favor with old Jiang Madam. He specifically looked for nice things to say, and so it followed that old Jiang Madam always accepted the same pattern of behavior from him. With Jiang Chao starting the whole thing, Jiang Susu also stood up, her lips curled, and said, "Elder brother's present is so good. Sun Yang really does not have the face to take my own gift out. Younger sister, please don't say this." Jiang Chao scratched his head. "My gift has always been lacking in comparison to yours." "Stop arguing back and forth already," Xia Yin smiled. "Suer, take out your birthday present for Zumu to take a look." Jiang Susu ordered a servant girl to present a small box made from sandalwood. The box itself looked exquisite. Hu Dai, together with Qing Ting, opened it and presented the item from within. It was a huge roll of double-sided embroidery of hundreds of shows, long life, sewn onto it. Without talking about the embroidery, just based on the thought and effort, it was enough to shock everyone. An example of show pattern. Jiang Susu lowered her head and modestly said, "Sun Yang was rushing for time and embroidered it badly. Therefore I could only sew it to look like this. Zumu, please do not dislike it." The embroidery was exquisite. The colors of the pattern matched to look bright and yet elegant. The words were also meticulously embroidered. Not a strand was loose, and the onlookers were unable to find a fault in the needlework at first glance. If taken to the embroidery department in the palace, it would even be considered of top quality. Jiang Susu was indeed talented, and in terms of embroidery, she could definitely be named as the capital's absolute best. The filial piety and modesty of hers immediately caused many of the Furins present to have high praises. Old Jiang Madam smiled too. With Suer's thoughts, "You've put in much more effort than your brother." Jiang Chao laughed, he, but did not say anything. Jiang Susu looked towards Jiang Ruan de Jejia. "What present have you prepared for grandmother? It can't possibly be hidden any longer. Quickly let us see it." Chapter 75. 2. Chapter 75. 2. With Jiang Chao and Jiang Susu's gems in front, everyone now had their gazes on Jiang Ruan, wanting to see what good thing she could bring out. Jiang Ruan smiled faintly. "My present cannot be presented yet." Everyone was a little disappointed. Jiang Susu asked why. "Can't de Jejia allow Suer to have a peek?" Jiang Ruan gently rejected. "I cannot." Her tone was firm. Jiang Chao laughed. "It cannot be that eldest younger sister forgot to prepare a gift for Zumu. That is why you are saying this, right? Last time at maternal grandfather's house, wasn't it also the same, and it was mother who had to help and prepared one for you?" He appeared to have said it without any intent, but Xia Yin hurriedly said, "Chaoer." She interrupted his words, but people had already considered them. They thought that in the end she still had no biological mother to teach her, and although she looked beautiful, her worldly wisdom was weaker than Jiang Susu's. "I have let elder brother see a joke," Jiang Ruan smiled. "But speaking of which, why didn't maternal grandfather and his family come today?" "It can't be because Ruan Yang forgot to prepare a visiting gift, and so they won't even attend Zuma's longevity birthday celebration?" Once the words were said, Jiang Chao's face became stiff and Xia Yan was stupefied as well. Indeed, the Xiao family, as in-laws, did not have anyone present at old Jiang Madam's longevity birthday celebration. Even if they were unable to come, they should have sent a gift. However, from the beginning till now, there was no news from the Xia family. Naturally, it would be impossible for the Xia family to not attend just because Zhang Ruan forgot to prepare a visiting gift. But what exactly happened? The public's suspicious gaze made Zhang Quan immediately feel like he lost face, and he glared at Xia Yan. Xia Yan hurriedly said, "Your maternal grandmother has not been in good health recently, and the Fu has been working hard, so they will not be attending the birthday celebration." Zhang Ruan was enlightened. "Oh right, the last time when we went to maternal grandfather's house, didn't maternal grandmother vomit blood and faint? Unexpectedly she has yet to recover." Xia Yan quickly followed her words. "Yes, her condition hasn't improved yet." Furthermore, Zhang Ruan suddenly bowed to Xia Yan. "While maternal grandmother is ill, and mother extremely worried, mother still had to organize the longevity birthday celebration for Zumu and has managed to organize such a beautiful banquet. It is truly the Jiang family's fortune. Ruan Yang is ashamed." The gratitude that she spoke of caused Xia Yan to feel prickles down her back. Weren't Zhang Ruan's words implying that even though her own mother was sickly, she still had the heart to organize the birthday banquet? How unfilial of her. Today, she continuously talked and laughed with ease in front of all the Furins, and there was not a trace of heavy-heartedness. She was afraid that now all the Furins were considering this matter silently. She looked at the gentle young lady in front of her, and was secretly gritting her teeth in her heart. She suddenly laughed. "It is nothing." Thinking of the things that would take place later, Xia Yan felt happy. Old Jiang Madam looked at them without any change in expression. At this moment, a sharp voice was heard from the courtyard. Where did this demon come from? Everyone present looked to the side and saw a middle-aged Taoist priest wearing a green robe and a Taoist hat appear. He carried a cloth bundle on his shoulder and carried a peachwood stick in his hand, and his expression was grim. Taoist hat. Peachwood stick. The origin of the peach tree sword. The use of peachwood to make such swords came from a legend about a gigantic holy tree on the Tushou mountain. It had a trunk over 3,000 miles and had captured the essence of 5 types of different holy trees. In ancient China, the northeast direction was known to be the Devil's Gate position. Therefore, 2 deities, namely Shendu and Yulei, took charge of the area to prevent any evil spirits from entering the human realm. They were protected under a branch of the gigantic peach tree. Whenever they saw any ghost entering the human realm, they would tie the ghost with hemp strings and throw them into a forest to be eaten by tigers. Since then, all ancient Chinese houses would have 2 panels carved from peach wood to be hung on doors to drive away evil spirits. Later it evolved into a tradition where the 7-star sword was made by peach wood and used in any place to drive evil spirits away. More. Xia Yan was shocked. Su Kong Daozhang. Then she apologized to everyone. "A few days ago, I invited this Taoist priest to do an exorcism for the Jiang Fu. I never thought he would arrive today." Daozhang. Taoist priest. When the Taoist priest entered, Zhang Quan was also courteous to him, saying, "We haven't seen each other in a long time. 5 years have passed." Su Kong bowed to him. "If everything has been well with Darren, then this priest can put his mind at ease." Pin Dao. It is a manner of humbly addressing oneself, used by Taoist priests. Old Jiang Madam creased her eyebrows. "What dark things are you doing?" She was extremely impolite. Wuyan Zhang Qi. A foul/dark atmosphere. Zhang Quan said, "Mother, this Taoist priest is someone from this son's past. He also came to our Fu 5 years ago." The Furins present had never seen a wandering Taoist priest before. However, upon hearing what Zhang Quan said, they were more at ease. Zhang Ruan stood in the same spot, quietly looking at the priest, who wore a grave expression. When she heard 5 years ago, her lips slightly curved into a smile with unknown meaning. "The reason why this priest came today was because Foreign asked me to bless this Fu with good fortune," Su Kong continued. "But when this priest entered, I saw a dark air around the Fu. I am afraid that there is a demon creating chaos." Pinseng. Another form of address by priests/priests. Old Jiang Madam had a slightly angry expression on. "Help me chase this person out." "Mother. This Daozhang is a master 6. Zhang Quan simply shook off Old Jiang Madam's thoughts. He turned around and hurriedly asked the Taoist priest, "Are Su Kong Daozhang's words true?" 6 Gao ran. someone of a noble character or an expert in something. This priest has never lied. Su Kong twisted his beard. And that demon is in this Fu. He walked around the hall and his gaze slowly landed on Zhang Ruan. Upon seeing this, everyone held their breath and heard the Taoist priest say, "Although this priest does not know who this young lady is, this priest dares to confirm that the dark air in this Fu is caused by this young lady. This is impossible." Xia Yan appeared shocked. "She is the eldest young miss of our Fu." "Eldest young miss?" Su Kong said, "The one who was sent to the countryside residence 5 years ago. I did not expect her to be so old already. Then there is no mistake." "Dao Zhang, what are you talking about?" Zhang Susu continued. "How can my elder sister be a demon?" However, Su Kong spoke to Jiang Quan Darren. "Didn't this priest help calculate this young lady's fortune 5 years ago and asked her to not return to the Fu ever? Otherwise it would incur great trouble. Even if Darren's heart has softened, you still cannot seek self-destruction." The people present had never heard this story as they thought in their hearts that it was no wonder Jiang Quan had called this Taoist priest someone from his past. He had already helped Zhang Ruan calculate her fortune 5 years ago. However, Xia Yan shook her head. But no matter what, she is still Laoi's daughter. Thus how could Laoi bear to part with her just like this? Does Dao Zhang have any good solutions? As Zhang Ruan listened, her smile contained a trace of irony. What Xia Yan said would cause those not in the know to think that Jiang Quan shared a deep father-daughter bond with her. If not for Imperial Censor Wang's Censor Report 7, Jiang Quan would truly wish to leave her at the countryside residence for good, taking that he never had her, the Jiang family's eldest young miss. 7 Zhi. Book with a slipcase which keeps account of all the deeds of the people with court positions. "Mother, what is going on?" Zhang Chao said. "What do Dao Zhang's words mean?" "This?" Xia Yan glanced towards Zhang Ruan with a look of being in a difficult position, like it was extremely hard for her to talk about it. Seeing the situation, Su Kong said, "This priest helped Zhang Fu's eldest young miss calculate her fortune, and she turned out to be the bane of others' existence. She is destined to curse both her mother and future husband, and all of her relatives in this lifetime. She carries with her the scourge of blood and death. It is in her nature because she was born cursed." Xingchen Bazi references Chinese astrology and the importance of time at the point of birth. Different modes of time tell you about your fortune/destiny. Minga. Using your birth date and time to match with the constellation in the sky to use to calculate your fortune. The bane of others' existence. Once the words were said, everyone immediately went into a shock. They unconsciously looked towards Zhang Ruan and their gazes were filled with fear. Even if she was really beautiful at present, in everyone's eyes she was no different from a demon. Zhang Ruan did not react despite all of the gazes upon her. She simply stood silently. After a short while she laughed lightly. "What are you laughing about?" Zhang Li, who had been rejoicing in others' misfortune, asked. "I laugh because it is all thanks to Su Kong Dao Zhang that Ruan Yang knows that she bears the sign of the cursed star, and is the bane of others' existence." Those words contained some unclarity and everyone looked at her, puzzled. Zhang Ruan said, "Since Dao Zhang calculated Ruan Yang's birthdate characters 5 years ago, and then left after 5 years, you must have advanced and should probably have the ability to resolve this cursed fate." Su Kong was stunned and he shook his head, saying, "Young Miss sign is too strong. Therefore with this priest's skills, there is nothing to be done." Zhang Ruan shook her head and said, "Dao Zhang's words make sense, but based on Dao Zhang's words, I will curse my husband, my mother and all my relatives. However, during those 5 years that I've lived in the countryside residence, I did not bring misfortune to anyone. Other than my own body being a bit weak, the people in the countryside residence seem to be living better day by day. How do you explain this?" These words had another meaning to them and the present company were all sharp. They usually attended a lot of social engagements, so how could there be a meaning that they could not hear? Xia Yan pretended to touch her sideburns without any intentions and Su Kong immediately said, "That was because the people in the countryside residence were not at all related to young miss, they were all just some farmers and servant. So it is like this." Zhang Ruan looked as if she suddenly understood everything and with a smile on her face, she said, "That's why so many things of a ridiculous nature have happened to the Jiang Fu after Ruan Yang's return from the countryside residence." "That is correct." Su Kong said and nodded his head. Then the one who would be cursed first should be my closest kin. Zhang Ruan looked at Zhang Quan. Based on the fact that I cursed my mother to death, the first one I would curse after returning to the Fu should be my father. How come? It is actually second older brother and second younger sister? Zhang Quan heard Zhang Ruan's words and felt some unhappiness in his heart. Su Kong paused for a while and said this. The priest does not know either. So there are things that Dao Zhang does not know. Zhang Ruan smiled, Mother. Do you think that I am cursed too? Of course. Of course not. Xia Yan dried her tears, but Ruaner. She could not continue on and could only look extremely sorrowful. Father, do you think that Ruan Yang was born under a cursed star too? Zhang Ruan looked towards Zhang Quan. Oh. Zhang Quan looked at her and felt that even if Zhang Ruan was smiling, the pair of beautiful eyes looked like they were immersed in ice-cold water, making one feel chilled. He was distracted for a moment. It was as though he saw Zhao Mei, who looked haggard lying in her coffin, asking coldly. He panicked. Immediately a suffocated feeling emerged, and he coldly said, Do you wish to harm the whole Jiangfu? Why would Ruan Yang wish to harm the whole of Jiangfu? Zhang Ruan said. If she so easily harmed them, how would she feel content? She had to ensure that step by step it was crushed under her foot, until it became dust and forever disappeared from this world. Zhang Ruan looked at old Zhang Madam, but old Zhang Madam had already shut her eyes, as if she did not wish to see this shoddy drama. Xia Yan asked Dao Zhang, Then what should we do now? Su Kong looked towards Zhang Ruan. If it was before, letting her stay at the countryside residence would have sufficed. However, you all fetched her home, and now the evil air has grown day by day. It is best to find an ancestral temple and have her stay there for a few years. After everything has subsided a bit, perhaps it can be resolved. Lian Xiao, who was standing behind Zhang Ruan, felt a chill in her heart. What a vicious thought. After becoming a Buddhist nun at a temple for a few years, she was afraid that the people in the capital would eventually forget that there was someone called Zhang Ruan. As time passed, Zhang Ruan would grow older and older, and it would be even harder for her to find a good match for marriage. Wrong. Xia Yan had already declared in front of so many people that Zhang Ruan bore a cursed sign, thus which decent family in the capital would want her. She was afraid that they could not wait to hide from her. There was complete silence. Then suddenly a low and deep voice said, Dao Zhang, please be mindful of your words. Chapter 76. Chapter 76. A yellow-robed monk whose beard was completely white, walked slowly into the hall, staff in hand. Compared with the Taoist priest Su Kong, this elderly monk was amiable and benign-looking, his movements infused with an air of holiness that would not tolerate any profanity. He really seemed to be the epitome of a Buddhist disciple. As soon as she saw this monk, Lian Xiao exhaled a long breath. Someone in the hall recognized the monk and cried out in amazement, Isn't this Great Master Huiju? What is he doing here? Great Master Huiju's reputation far exceeded that of Su Kong Dao Zhang. Every single one of the rich and noble families in the capital knew of the enlightened senior monk with a brilliant grasp of Buddhist doctrine, who had appeared in the capital city at the end of the previous year. When Xia Yan's eyes landed on Huiju, she knew this boded no good, but Zhang Ruan was still standing in the middle of the hall with a faint smile on her face. Xia Yan was instantly full of suspicion. How did Zhang Ruan establish a connection with this monk? However, on thinking about the events of the day, she absolutely could not allow Huiju to hamper her plan, so she smiled and said, Why has Great Master come to the Fu? Is it also to exorcise evil? Huiju placed his palms together in greeting, inclined his head slightly and said, Ba. He turned to look at Zhang Ruan and greeted her. Young Mississippi. Dejejia, on a normal day you don't set foot outside. When did you become acquainted with this great master? Jiang Susu sounded innocent, but her words were accusatory. They suggested that, if Zhang Ruan were truly a virtuous lady who kept to her own quarters, she would not be able to meet people as she wished, even if it was a monk. Zhang Ruan sighed lightly and looked towards old Zhang Madam, who had opened both her eyes at some stage. This is my present for Zumu. In a heavy voice, Zhang Quan asked, How did this come to be? When he compared Huiju to Su Kong Dao Zhang, He naturally understood that Great Master Huiju was the more trustworthy of the two. However, as the monk was affiliated with Zhang Ruan, it was inevitable that there was some degree of suspicion. A few days ago, I went out with the young miss from Chief Historian Lin's Fu Lin Zixiang, intending to select a gift for Zumu, but nothing was satisfactory. Zumu has no need to worry about food or clothing, and even the most sumptuous items would not be of interest to her. Ruan Yang thought, nothing in this world can surpass the importance of peace and good health, and a long life of good fortune. I heard that there was a great master Huiju in the capital, a disciple of Buddha's seat. As it turns out, Chief Historian Lin's Fu has some connection with the great master, so I asked Lin Zixiang for a favor, as I wanted to invite the great master to pray for Zumu. Buddha's seat. Buddha had 4 seats disciples below him. These 4 bodhisattvas in Buddhism refers to Manjushri, Guanyin Bodhisattva, Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, Jizo Bodhisattva. So this Huiju is a disciple under one of these bodhisattvas. All the rich and noble families in the capital city were followers of Buddha, and many of them had invited Great Master Huiju into their fuss to explain Buddhist scriptures. Lin Zixiang's mother had always been a follower of Buddha. Thus, the explanation Zhang Ruan had given was adequate, and would not evoke any suspicion. She spoke with such sincerity that to doubt her seemed to be tantamount to disappointing her absolute devotion. Zhang Ruan said softly, if Ruang Yang had known earlier that mother had already invited Dao Zhang to come and pray on behalf of the Jiangfu, I would definitely not have taken the liberty to make this decision. She gently bowed to Huiju, saying, Honorable Great Master Huiju, Ruan Yang cannot thank you enough for your willingness to make this journey to pray for Zumu. However, now that Dao Zhang is here, it seems to be unnecessary. She smiled slightly and said, however, since Dao Zhang is at present engaged in performing an exorcism and is not in the right frame of mind to pray for Zumu, would Great Master kindly consent to praying for Zumu now? The light of your blessing will surely be able to confer long and continuous good fortune. Everyone was slightly startled on hearing her words. Upon deeper thought, to those who might be more calculative and scheming, if this eldest daughter of the Zhang family was not scared about something, could she still bring up praying for blessings even at this time? Others, who looked only on the surface of the matter, were full of praise for Zhang Ruan. She showed that not only was she not concerned about her cursed fate, but instead was concerned about praying for her family's Zumu. It was such an act of laudable filial piety. In contrast, Xia Yan and the others, including Jiang Quan the so-called son, were only concerned with what that fate portended, and blatantly disregarded how the elderly foreign was feeling at that moment. Old Zhang Madam looked coolly at Zhang Ruan. Although she said nothing, a gleam of understanding appeared in her eyes. She did not raise any objections but quietly watched to see what would happen. Dao Zhang can also pray for blessings, Xia Yan said, nervous about what other strange occurrences might transpire. Must we inconvenience the great master? One of the Furens present could finally no longer stay silent and reminded everyone, whether good or bad, this is eldest Zhang Miss' heartfelt intention. Why should we disappoint this child? That's right. Everyone in the capital city knows of Great Master Huiju's reputation. Do you know how many people want to receive prayers of blessing, but can't see this wish realized? The sounds of agreement from the crowd grew in volume. Some genuinely believed that Zhang Ruan was to be pitied, while others were merely following the crowd to take advantage of the situation. Only Zhang Ruan continued to stand in silence, the corners of her mouth uplifted in amusement, as if her mood had not been shaken in the slightest by the situation in front of her. Huiju was standing closest to her, and naturally could clearly see her expression. From the time he had walked into the hall, he had noticed the people there were intentionally targeting her. Yet this young lady before his eyes was still standing perfectly straight, all smiles, as if everything was firmly in her grasp. He thought about how, after Zhang Ruan had left that day, all had occurred as she had said. The prefectural magistrate's Fu had indeed been haunted, and they had invited him to conduct an exorcism the next day. Could it be that what she had said was true? In this world, there are actually people who know the past and therefore also know the future. Deep in his heart, he firmly rejected this notion. This eldest daughter of the Jiang family must have some truly able person directing her from behind. Otherwise, how could she know so much? He shook his head and said, "Today, this monk was originally here to pray on behalf of this Fu's old madam. But just now, this monk heard what Dao Zhang said, and cannot remain silent." Lao Na, term used by an elderly Buddhist monk to refer to himself. When Xia Yan heard this, she sensed something was not right, and immediately smilingly said, "Great Master, you can tell us whatever it is in private after the longevity feast. We of the monkhood do not engage in falsehoods," Huiju said. "It is simply that this monk sees that eldest young miss has a full forehead, an upright nose bridge, plump and smooth lips. Her appearance is that of a person who is blessed with good fortune. The fate of being born under a cursed star, which Dao Zhang has pronounced, is heresy." He said all this with a righteous and majestic bearing, such that those who heard him could not help but believe him. When Huiju appeared, Su Kong Dao Zhang felt his confidence waver, for he was only a cheap trickster who was used to conning ordinary people on a regular basis. It's just that, this time, he had been ordered to come by Xia Yan. He could never match up to the renown and positive public opinion that Huiju enjoyed in the capital city. However, now that he had already reached this stage, he had no choice but to brace himself and press on. So, he assumed a haughty attitude and said, "Could it be that Great Master has made a mistake? This priest studied at Mt. Mao, and has never made a miscalculation in fortune-telling. I have already verified the eldest Jiang Mrs. birthdate characters, and she is indeed born under this star, and will be the bane of others' existence." Mao Shan, Mt. Mao, the Taoist mountain southeast of Zhejiang County, Jiangsu Province. Jiang Ruan smiled faintly as she stood where she was, looking at Huiju. Huiju's skills of deception should be more polished than that of Dao Zhang. That Huiju could so openly swindle so many people in Yuzhou for so many years without being discovered was of course due to his innate skill. But without doubt, the most important factor was still his ability to disguise his appearance. Anyone who looked at him would never be able to connect this amiable and benign-faced monk, with righteousness shining from every pore, with a trickster. This time not only did she need Huiju, it was even more a test for him. If Huiju was unable to carry off this situation, then in future there would be no necessity to assist him. Her gaze was piercing. "Huiju, show me what you are capable of." Huiju listened to Su Kong Dao Zhang's words without any anger. He said, "Kindly forgive this monk for not blindly accepting what Dao Zhang says." This posture caused the surrounding Furins, who were all enjoying the show, to have even more respect for him. They felt that Huiju was neither servile nor overbearing, which was entirely befitting a senior monk. In contrast, Su Kong Dao Zhang had an arrogant attitude, which had subconsciously evoked the people's dislike. Su Kong Dao Zhang was entirely unaware of this, and was solely focused on not allowing Huiju to destroy his arguments. Consequently, he feigned anger to say, "Could it be that Great Master is deliberately making things difficult for this priest?" Huiju sighed deeply before saying, "If Dao Zhang insists on seeing it this way, then this monk is powerless to do anything about it. However, this monk cannot bear to see eldest Jiang Miss having to shoulder the burden of this accusation. It is true that this Fu has a sinister energy, but it is not due to her fate. Rather, it is because a demon has caused mischief in this Fu, and it may be assumed that it has attached itself to someone in the Fu. That person is not eldest Jiang Mississippi." Lian Xiao, who was standing behind, heard all this and wanted to laugh. It was all spiritual mumbo-jumbo, yet the Furins in the hall were all listening with grave expressions, as if firmly believing in all that was said, without a shred of doubt. Without waiting for Dao Zhang's response, Huiju said, "This monk will now think of a way to force this demon to show itself." "This is not good," said Xia Yan agitatedly, looking towards Jiang Quan. Jiang Quan was of two minds. He was eager to expel Jiang Fu's recent spell of bad luck, and even though he did not trust the person Jiang Ruan had invited, Great Master Huiju's renown spoke for itself. If he could really search out this demon, wouldn't Jiang Fu have peace and security? Xia Yan noticed his hesitation and felt even more anxious. With all her calculations and deliberations, she had never imagined that Jiang Ruan would go so far as to invite Great Master Huiju to the Fu, giving her a taste of her own medicine. Great Master Huiju's renown was much greater than that of Su Kong Dao Zhang. If she raised an objection, it was to be feared that everyone would be on Huiju's side. On thinking of all this, Xia Yin felt hatred and fury rise up within her. Without waiting for Jiang Quan to make a decision, old Jiang Madam spoke up. Since Great Master has this intention, could we please trouble Great Master? Zumu. Jiang Susu furrowed her brow. Old Jiang Madam looked at her without really seeing her, and said to Xia Yin, daughter-in-law, haven't you always wanted to rid the Jiangfu of its bad luck? Great Master Huiju is an enlightened senior monk. Isn't daughter-in-law happy? I would not dare, Xia Yin said as she eked out a smile. Su Kong Daozhong was cold-shouldered as Huiju placed his palms together and said, Ba, this monk needs to take a look at each courtyard. That's not an issue, Jiang Quan said. Show Great Master the way. Immediately, 2 maidservants came forward to guide Huiju. The 3 of them were right in front, while Xia Yin and Jiang Susu followed closely behind in a bit to prevent any trickery by Huiju. Jiang Quan and the Furins who were there for the entertainment also followed behind, as did Kai Kei and Du Wan who were supporting old Jiang Madam by the arm, all of them keen to see what was going on. Jiang Ruan unhurriedly brought up the rear. Jiang Chao glared daggers at her like a venomous snake, but she pretended not to notice, and called out to Su Kong Daozhong who was standing to one side, Daozhong should also follow us. Buddhism and Taoism each have their own merits. Perhaps today's situation is a great opportunity for increasing cultivation. Shou Wei probably refers to cultivation, a Taoist concept by which humans can extend their lifespan and gain supernatural powers through practicing a set of martial and mystical arts involving meditation and the cultivation of qi, life energy. Definition taken from here. She had spoken mockingly, but a gentle smile was on her face, so no one could really tell what she was thinking. Jiang Ruan did not allow him to decline the invitation. Lian Xiao and Bai Ji hemmed him in front and back, so Su Kong had no choice but to grit his teeth and walk on. Huiju resolutely did as he had said and walked through all the rooms in every single courtyard. Several of the Yinyangs who had not come out to greet the guests that day were shocked to see such a spectacle. When the servants had informed them of the reason for it, they felt quite bewildered, but also simply followed along. Huiju did not leave out any courtyard and the last one he visited was Hong Ying's. When Hong Ying heard the sequence of events, she hid behind Jiang Quan's back in a panicked state. Xia Yin could not avoid noticing this and frowned, but Hong Ying seized the opportunity when no one else was paying attention to steal a quick glance at Jiang Ruan. After walking through all the courtyards without any mishap, Su Kong Daozhong could not help himself and said, provocatively, Great Master, didn't you say a demon was causing mischief? At present it looks as if everything is wonderfully stable. Perhaps Great Master has made a mistake. Huiju placed his palms together and said, Ba. Now, ladies and gentlemen, would you kindly follow this monk to the main courtyard? At the main courtyard right in the middle of the Jiangfu, just outside Jiang Quan's study, Huiju silently retrieved an incense censer from his bag and shook out the contents of another cloth bag, which turned out to be incense powder. He placed the incense powder into the censer and also lit a joss stick. As green smoke spiraled forth, he sat down in the lotus position, one hand striking a wooden fish, the other hand fingering prayer beads, while he closed his eyes and started to meditate. Muyu, lit. Wooden fish, also known as a Chinese temple block or wooden bell. A wooden percussion instrument used by monks and lay people in the Mahayana Buddhist tradition. In this kind of atmosphere everyone was a little keyed up. Only Jiang Ruan looked calm and composed. Xia Yin and Jiang Susu were naturally increasingly apprehensive. Under the weight of many eyes, Huiju continued chanting Buddhist scriptures. First nothing happened. Half a joss stick later, incredibly, a dense black mass suddenly appeared in the sky flying towards them. Everyone was alarmed. The sky had already been gloomy, but the dense black mass obstructed almost the entire sky above the Jiangfu. Once the mass drew closer, only then could one clearly see that it was composed of hundreds of big, black-winged bats. Fluttering their wings, they approached the Fu in an almost slow motion. All the Furins and young ladies at the scene cried out in fear, but the cloud of black-winged bats flew past the main courtyard without stopping and continued on. After flying back and forth for a while, they all finally and unexpectedly stopped above Su Xian Yuan. After a brief pause, the cloud of bats abruptly rushed into the ladies' chamber of the residence, where a maidservant was busily tidying up. Faced with such a big cloud of bats, she immediately ran out, her normally rosy face having lost its color. Everyone present was dumbfounded and Xia Yan and Jiang Su turned pale. Huiju stopped chanting and said, "The demon has shown its true nature." "Whose residence is that?" The assistant minister's foreign was the first to ask. Another foreign replied, "It seems to be the residence of 2nd Jiang, Mississippi." With an ashen face, Jiang Chao asked, "Great Master, what do you mean by this? Are you saying that my Mimi is a demon?" Huiju said mildly, 2nd Jiang Miss is not a demon, but the demon which is causing mischief is now in 2nd Jiang Miss's courtyard. 2nd Jiang Miss has been staying with this evildoer for many years, so she has been possessed by it. It is due to this that disaster has befallen the Jiang Fu. Well then, how did my Mimi come to be possessed by a demon? Jiang Chao's face was ugly as he said, "Every single thing that has happened in this Fu, all happened when eldest younger sister returned." Jiang Ruan smiled faintly but did not speak, as if she had not heard Jiang Chao vilifying her. Huiju said, "Perhaps 2nd Jiang Miss experienced some kind of danger previously, or suffered an illness. During an illness, a person's spiritual consciousness is weak, and the demon might have taken advantage of the weakness to enter the body." "Didn't 2nd Jiang Miss fall into the water at the Linglong boat several days ago?" The assistant minister's foreign smilingly said. "At that time she was pulled from the water, gasping for breath. I am afraid it might have been at this time that the misfortune occurred." "Umitba," Huiju intoned as he placed his palms together. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone came to the awareness that eldest Jiang Miss was not really born under a cursed star. Instead, the troubles faced by the Jiang Fu were due to the proclivity for evil caused by 2nd Mississippi. On thinking about how Jiang Ruan had earlier been wrongly accused yet had not gotten angry or forgotten her manners, and even faced the situation with a smile, the Furens were full of admiration for her. Thus, they started to discuss this amazing turn of events whereby the previously unjustly treated eldest Jiang Miss was now being defended. So it turns out that eldest Jiang Miss is innocent. Just as I said, we've seen this nice girl dishonored for no good reason. She was almost made the scapegoat. TSK. 2nd Jiang Miss must have known that she was being possessed by the demon, and that's why she wanted to throw the teapot at eldest Mississippi. Eldest Miss is all alone. She doesn't even have someone to speak on her behalf. If it wasn't for the senior monk today, perhaps her entire life would have been ruined." The voices were not actually loud, but neither were they soft, and they were clear enough to be overheard. Jiang Su was aware that she had lost face and was full of bitter hatred. She had never imagined that today, she would once again have victory snatched away from her at the last minute. Not only that, Jiang Ruan had also managed to turn the tables on her. When she thought about this, she felt somewhat flustered. If she had been singled out as the inauspicious person, then what would happen in future? After further consideration, she thought it was still all right. This bald donkey had not said that she had the fate of one born under a cursed star, but only that she was possessed. Everything would be good after some days. Tulu, lit. Bald donkey. Derogatory term for a Buddhist monk. Xia Yan was so enraged, she was dying to charge at Jiang Ruan and rip out her throat. She knew there was something shady about this great master Huiju. He and Jiang Ruan must have established a connection earlier. Although she did not understand why this renowned senior monk would help Jiang Ruan, she was convinced that the cloud of big, black-winged bats which had appeared today had to be Huiju's doing. However, they had followed him the entire time and Huiju had not made any kind of movement, so how on earth had he managed to stage something like this? Old Jiang Madam had not said a single word during this time, only observing Jiang Ruan quietly. Jiang Quan had not been inclined to accept what was happening, but at that moment, watching so many big black-winged bats rushing into Jiang Su's residence without any reason, he believed Huiju's explanation to some extent. Thus he said, "Great Master, what should my daughter do now?" Jiang Ruan's smile turned slightly mocking. Even till now, Jiang Quan was still concerned about Jiang Su. The father-daughter relationship was indeed strong. If their positions had been switched, Jiang Quan would have considered her filthy, and wished that she would disappear from the face of the earth. Huiju said, "We just need to get rid of the bad luck. This monk will write a few Buddhist texts and paste them in the room, and all will be well after a few days." However, he hesitated for a while before continuing. Second Miss has been possessed by this evildoer for too long, so a few days will not be sufficient. Then what can be done? Jiang Quan said agitatedly. Please, Great Master, save my daughter. Zhang Darren does not need to be anxious, Huiju said. This monk knows of a private temple. It would be best for Second Miss to go there to devote herself to spiritual development for a period of time. In the temple, she would feel the influence of eternal Buddhist scriptures the entire day. The filthy energy will be dispelled, and Second Miss will emerge unscathed. Jiamiao, lit. Home or family temple. Apparently, in ancient times, officials could build such temples as a place to worship their ancestors. Confucianism. Xia Yin was shocked. Jiang Su had already exclaimed, I haven't been possessed by any demon, and I don't want to go to the temple. Sur. Jiang Quan shouted coldly. He looked at Huiju and asked, For how long? Great Master Huiju said softly, This monk does not dare to give any guarantees, but it is to be feared that Second Miss will not be able to return home for 3 to 5 years. In a split second, Xia Yan's face took on an unsightly expression as she turned to look at Zhang Ruan. Their plan just now had been to send Zhang Ruan to the temple for 3 to 5 years, and now Zhang Ruan had returned the intention with thanks, instead sending Jiang Su to the temple for a few years. So ruthless. Grieved, she said, Is there any other way? Great Master, I only have this daughter. Great Master Huiju shook his head and sighed without saying anything further. Jiang Quan was in a dilemma. If Jiang Su stayed at the Jiangfu, even more incidents would occur. Moreover, if Jiang Su stayed at the temple, her personal bad luck would also be eliminated. Although he was reluctant to part with her, he knew that this was the best way. Xia Yin grew even more anxious on beholding Jiang Quan's expression. Jiang Chao had already thrown caution to the wind and was yelling at Huiju, You attention-seeking bald donkey. Clearly you're putting on a show to trick us. See if I don't tear your mouth off. Although Huiju was fearful, he maintained a calm expression in the face of this storm and retreated a few steps wordlessly. Stop him. Several of Jiang Quan's personal guards stopped Jiang Chao. Usually Jiang Chao gave everyone the impression he was a person who tried not to offend anyone. But now his eyes were fierce and his words were crude. Upon seeing this, several of the foreign present who had been on the hunt for a man to marry their daughters off to change their plans. Jiang Quan felt his head hurt. Ordinarily, these siblings were the ones who made him feel the proudest, but lately they had disappointed him over and over again, making him impatient, impetuous, and short-sighted. Not even Jiang Ruan had made him feel thus. Jiang Ruan? He froze and looked at Jiang Ruan, who was still in the position she had been previously, a small smile on her face. She was clearly at the center of the entire situation, but she looked relaxed and at ease, seemingly having nothing at all to do with the proceedings. It was as if she had everything and everyone in her grasp, and was quietly watching the course of events unfold from the outside, observing other people's disputes with cold eyes. Jiang Quan could not help but shiver. He heard Jiang Ruan say, Second older brother has certainly spoken in error. Great Master was invited here by Ruan Yang, so if you doubt Great Master, then you also doubt Ruan Yang. In second older brother's opinion, why would a person like Great Master do the bidding of Ruan Yang? For money, with a monthly allowance of 2 coins, even the incense burned at an ordinary temple would cost more. The crowd was once again in an uproar. 2 coins a month, that was the allowance of a second-ranked maidservant. Even though Jiang Ruan was the Jiang family's daughter, she was frugal and exercised self-control. All this caused the people to wonder what the root cause was. Was Jiang Fu embarrassingly short of money at the moment, or was Xia Yan, the mistress of the Fu, too harsh on her stepdaughter? Jiang Quan could only feel as if his self-respect had been shattered. He glowered at Xia Yan and forced himself to suppress his anger, only to hear Jiang Ruan say, Second older brother considers Great Master Huiju to be a trickster, but Ruan Yang has yet to say that Su Kong Daozhang is a trickster. Since second younger sister is demon-possessed, that means that Ruan Yang was not born cursed and does not have the fate of being the bane of others' existence. What about the Daozhang who calculated Ruan Yang's birthdate characters 5 years ago, such that Ruan Yang had to waste 5 years at the rural residence? How should this debt be calculated? No matter what, there is no clear way to calculate the cost. It would be better to seek the advice of the capital magistrate. I am on good terms with the young miss of the capital magistrate's Fu. Perhaps it might be possible to ask him to accommodate us. Jing Zhaoying. Apparently an official title used in ancient times, akin to the mayor of the city. She had a gentle smile on her face, but in contrast, every word was laced with intense accusation. It was so menacing that one knew, whether retaliating or retreating, one was on dangerous ground. Su Kong Daozhong had long since started to sweat heavily, and he looked to Xia Yan in an unspoken appeal for help. Xia Yan said stiffly, Daozhong is an old acquaintance, and there must be some misunderstanding. Ruanyang, you are still young, there are many situations which cannot be seen as simply black or white. It would be best not to draw a definite conclusion. Jiang Quan finally could no longer bear the eyes of all who were watching the entertainment and growled, Enough! Xia Yan promptly stopped talking. Huiju said, This monk will send disciples with the scriptures when they have been written. Now the matter is over, this monk ought to take his leave. Jiang Ruan smiled and said, Not quite, Great Master has forgotten something. Huiju was slightly startled. Jiang Ruan continued, Ruanyang invited Great Master here today to pray for Zumu, but Great Master unexpectedly expelled a demonic influence from the Jiangfu. If it is convenient for Great Master, could you please pray for blessings for Zumu? Everyone present was quite astonished that Jiang Ruan still remembered at this time to ask for prayers for old Jiang Madam. Old Jiang Madam's face remained expressionless as she said, There is no need. Great Master and I are both tired. That you have purged my Jiangfu of these demonic influences is the greatest blessing I could have. She then said, Kai Kai, help me back to my room, and departed without taking leave of anyone. On seeing this, the Furins hurriedly got up to take their leave. Today they had witnessed such a good show, and it would not be appropriate for them to stay longer. However, the next day, there would undoubtedly be yet another rumor about the Jiang family making its way around the capital. Almost instantly, the room was cleared of guests. Jiang Ruan smiled slightly and said, If Great Master is taking his leave, I will see Great Master out. Huiju nodded. After they had reached the entrance of the Fu, Jiang Ruan looked at him and smiled. Many thanks to Great Master for coming to my aid today. Did young miss mean what she said at the start? Huiju lowered his head and maintained a humble attitude, looking very much like a benevolent Buddha. Of course, Jiang Ruan said with a smile. If Great Master is able to continue aiding Ruanyang in the same way as today, Buddha will see you accumulating much merit, and will not be indifferent to the child. She continued, Great Master has indeed opened the eyes of many people today. Huiju had been deceiving people for so many years that speaking truthfully was no longer something he could do. Mixing falsehood and truth was what the wandering monk had taught him from the very beginning. Today, as he had passed through Jiang Susu's residence, he had casually scattered a handful of powdered pig's blood there. Bats like pig's blood, but will not come and go at will. There were other substances blended with the powdered blood as well as also mixed with the incense burned at the main residence, which would cause the bats to come forth even in daytime. Those in the know would not have taken today's scene to be anything alarming, but the ignorant would have seen it as the manifestation of demonic influence. Jiang Ruan smiled faintly. Mother loves second younger sister dearly, and definitely will not easily let her go to the private temple. The bats will disperse in the daytime, but they will come and knock at the door at night. Now second miss is worried at heart, so she will naturally not oppose the notion of leaving for the temple, Huiju said without emotion. He had smeared a substance on Jiang Susu's door so that the bats would fly there at night and bump against the door with sufficient force to make a loud sound, but when Jiang Susu opened the door, she would find no one there. This would occur repeatedly until Jiang Susu would become paranoid, and then not long after she would, of her own accord, suggest going to the temple. Great Master is indeed brilliant. Jiang Ruan raised an eyebrow. This Huiju had some brains, and knew how to leave himself room to maneuver. If she could ensure a firm hold on him, she smiled and said, If Great Master can aid me in this way, I will return Great Master the favor. In a few days I will visit once again. Great Master must not forget what I have said. Huiju stared dazedly at the young girl in front of him, whose beautiful eyes were chilly even though she was smiling. She was so young, Yet her thoughts were more profound than any other unmarried daughter that he had ever met, with wisdom that was almost otherworldly. Huiju kept his thoughts to himself as he bid her farewell and left. Ho Yuan Nu Zi. Lit. Backyard woman/daughter. This alludes to the fact that noble women were kept at the back of the residence, and were not involved with the worldly affairs of men. It is just a sad way of saying that unmarried daughters have a narrow world view. In the commander-in-chief's Fu, Gu Foran had just returned home when Gui ran in excitedly from outside. Mother, did you see the Zhang family's eldest miss? What do you think? Gu Foran smiled and said, her looks are exceptional, her temperament is mild, she is educated and well-balanced, and she behaves in accordance with propriety. That is to say, she's not bad? Gui laughingly said, I knew that mother would find her acceptable. He then scratched his head and said, did you? Ish, how old is she? Hurry back to your room. When your father returns and sees you like this, he's going to chastise you again. We'll talk about this another day. Gu Foran scolded good-naturedly. As soon as he heard Gu Darren coming back, Gui immediately disappeared like a wisp of smoke. After he had left, Gu Foran sighed deeply. Does Foran think that eldest Zhang miss is not good? The maidservant beside her asked softly. You saw it for yourself today, the waters of the Zhang family run deep. Eldest Zhang miss has barely returned to the Fu yet has raised such a big tempest, and even managed to escape unscathed today. Her mind is definitely not as simple as she presents herself to be. She shook her head and continued, I only want to find a simple, pure girl to be Ear's wife. That girl's tendency towards evil is too great. Chapter 77. 1. Chapter 77. 1. It had already been raining for nearly a month, but the relentless pitter-patter of rain in Great Jean showed no signs of stopping. Many farms were devastated by the flooding, and in turn the price of rice began to escalate, even for stale rice. In this world, naturally there would not be sufficient provisions for everyone. Other than for the wealthy who were capable of paying premium prices for fresh produce from out of town, the common folk could only watch their provisions dwindle with each passing day. There were even some who weren't able to even have a meal. People were praying fervently for this bout of spring rain to come to an end, but alas, the sky did not fulfill mankind's desires, and the rain showed no signs of stopping. Zhang Quan had already settled the matters regarding the private temple, and had planned for Zhang Susu to be taken there in a few days' time. Although Xia Yan and Zhang Chao had been trying to dissuade him, Zhang Quan was still determined. Since the Xia family had not interceded for Zhang Susu because of Xia Jun, this matter was to proceed as planned. As expected, not long after old Zhang Madam's longevity birthday celebration, the capital indeed erupted with an increasing number of rumors and gossip regarding the Zhang family. One top rumor was that of the false prophecy made by Taoist priest Su Kong, who, when she was sent to him as a young child, stated that Zhang Ruan had been born under a cursed star. As a result, Zhang Ruan was sent to the countryside residence and made to suffer 5 years of unnecessary misfortune. Obviously, within the capital there were some from the upper echelon that were neither blind nor deaf. They were wise and insightful enough to see the subterfuge within all of this. The matter regarding Xia Yan's reputation as the genteel, virtuous and talented lady now required some reflection. That said, based on Zhang Ruan's performance the other day, it was evident that her disposition was not to be taken lightly. For a while now, the people of Great Jean were aware that the Zhang family's daughter was not one to be underestimated. Zhang Ruan was lost in thought while sitting by the window looking out at the curtain of rain. The hole in the roof of the house had finally been fixed, and on that day, not just the hole, even their monthly allowance had been restored to its rightful amount. In retrospect, it was probably due to Zhang Quan having lost face in the presence of Gu Foran, and so he had warned Xia Yan about it. Lu Zhu carried a flower pot of fresh China rose, and placed it by the front of the courtyard. She was smiling as she entered the house. Miss, today this servant heard from others that Su Kong Daozhang was arrested by the city guards because it was said that he was a conniving charlatan, a liar. Furthermore, it appears that while in prison he has received the board as corporal punishment, and it is said that one of his legs has been crippled. She seethed as she continued, he surely deserved it. Who gave him the right to be so ruthless and lacking in conscience, and to even go to the extent of fabricating the lie about the cursed star to vilify my young miss? Jiang Ruan declined to comment. That day, there were lots of Furins present, and it was inevitable that they would spill the beans on Su Kong Daozhang. Over the years, Su Kong Daozhang had not been only of service to Xia Yan's family, and when the other families who had engaged his services came to know of his deeds, naturally it was bound to stir up anger and hatred. In turn, it was to be expected that a formal lawsuit would be submitted to the constabulary. Zumbufang. Old police station in a foreign concession. Lian Xiao followed Zhang Ruan's line of sight and looked out the window. Sighing deeply, she lamented, "Don't know when this rain will stop." Then in a quiet voice she said, "Miss, now that the capital has a shortage of provision, why don't we take some of our provisions to sell? We would be able to make tons of money." Panman Buafan literally means pots filled and monks' earthen alms bowl doubles equals tons of money. Zhang Ruan shook her head and Lu Zhu voiced, "Mrs. thinking of waiting it out for a few more days? Who knows when this rain will stop, therefore, the opportune moment is now." Buying those provisions wasn't meant for resale. Zhang Ruan smiled. Then what's it for? Lu Zhu was perplexed. To save someone. Save someone. Lu Zhu deliberated those two words when suddenly her eyes lit up. Mrs. planning to wait a few more days before taking those provisions out to aid the disaster relief, providing for the victims of the disaster, thus saving their lives. You've only got half of it right, Zhang Ruan smiled in reply. I'm not planning to save their lives. The ones that she intended to save were the Zhao family. Lu Zhu's eyes fluttered, but she did not ask any further. After a moment's thought, she suddenly said, "Miss, this servant heard that the reservoir in the north of the capital is starting to overflow and the emperor has ordered 8th Prince to manage the overflow situation. He has also transferred back the Grand Counselor Li Fu's young master Lian to go along." Lu Zhu was a second-rank servant and would naturally get more opportunities to mingle with people from the marketplace and visit the local haunts of the common people. Moreover, she was good at establishing relationships and connections, and had the ability to get first-hand information quickly. Lian. Zhang Ruan smiled and the gleam in her eyes was rather chilling. Finally, the wait has brought result. Li Dong had 2 sons. Li Yang, who was lustful and a dandy, unwilling to learn martial arts, and a devout follower of the hedonistic lifestyle. Unfortunately, currently Li Yang was handicapped. Undoubtedly Li Dong was not willing to take things lying down, however. He had been biding his time and had not struck out at the Jiangfu yet. This was due most likely to the work of his younger son. Lian was sinister and cunning, and extremely intelligent. In the past life, Xianli had thought rather highly of him, and so at that time his efforts to entice Li Dong were only worth 30% for his power and influence, whereas the 70% was primarily meant for Lian's intelligence and wisdom. Lian was a person who would protect others even when knowing that the other person was wrong, and presently he viewed Li Yang with utmost importance. Jiang Ruan smirked. In her previous life, Xianli had told her a secret concerning Lian, a secret that even Li Yang and Li Dong were not aware of, and this secret would be her biggest bargaining chip. She said to Lu Zhu, "Tell Lian Xiao and Bai Ji to come back quickly, and also take out a deck of Yi cards. Miss wants to play the Yi cards?" Lu Zhu chuckled. "This servant will go and return with the other 2. Yezi Pai, leaf card is a kind of card, also called Nyang card, harmony card, evil talisman card. Its gameplay was called leaf play in ancient times. This ancient gambling game is an important part of China's traditional culture, a traditional Chinese entertainment project, and a treasure of the Chinese nation. The gameplay and algorithm are the same as mahjong. More. The Grand Counselor's Fu in the capital. Li Dong was sitting on a soft couch in the middle of the main hall. A beautiful concubine was massaging his shoulders, and at his feet, there was another concubine gently pummeling his legs with her fist. Both concubines had scared expressions on their faces, while Li Dong's disposition was stormy, and his facial expression was fierce, devoid of his usual phony smiling facade. Given his savage and murderous aura, it was evident that his frame of mind was not good at the moment. Just then, a boy servant entered reporting, "Second young master has returned." From outside the hall walked in a young man who looked to be around 17 or 18 years of age. He was wearing azure-colored jacquard woven silk attire, and around his waist was a yellow tiger-patterned belt. His face was handsome and his skin was pale, as if he had not been in the sun for many years, and he had a pair of deep black eyes that was shrouded in gloom. Upon seeing the young man, Li Dong immediately rose from his seat. "What took you so long?" "Father." Lian knitted his brows. "How is elder brother now?" At the mention of Li Yong, a hint of cruelty flashed across Li Dong's face. "What is there to expect? His life can be considered worthless now. I am determined to see Jiang Su buried with him." "We can't act rashly." Lian shot Li Dong a tumultuous look. Upon hearing him say that, Li Dong retorted in fury, "In your letter to me, you asked me to refrain from taking action against the Jiang Fu. What was that all about? Your elder brother is currently bedridden, and yet we are not able to murder that slut? Does father really think that the Jiang Fu's second miss was responsible for elder brother's predicament?" Lian queried. "What do you mean?" Lian looked at him mockingly. "It is so obvious, yet father has allowed your rage to cloud your judgment and thus rendered you unable to clearly judge the matter. This whole situation is actually a deliberate provocation of someone, with the sole intent of driving a wedge between the Jiang and the Li families, for only the fisherman will reap the benefit." Shi Wang's Hili, fisherman that reaps the benefit. This is part of a fable comedium. The fable is known as the Battle of the Sandpiper and Clam. While the Sandpiper and Clam were busy fighting, the fishermen gained a big haul. Their fight allowed the third party to enter and gain the upper hand. The fable tells people to be vigilant against the true enemy in the intricacies of conflict. "Are they from Fifth Prince's faction?" Li Dong asked. Currently the courts were trying to gain Xian Li's favor, but none at present could surpass the most influential Fifth Prince. "No." Lian interrupted him. While the Jiang Fu was the location of the matter, the person who plotted against elder brother had most certainly infiltrated the Fu. Furthermore, it is very likely that this person is from the Jiang family. I have deliberated and concluded that second Jiang miss is the least likely to plot against elder brother. As for the Jiang family's other daughters, the maternal family of third Jiang miss is closely involved with Jiang Quan's official career, therefore they would not burn their bridges. So we are left with eldest and fourth Mississippi. Both of their birth mothers are not alive, and in addition, they do not receive Jiang Quan's affections. So if anyone would be more likely to make things difficult for Jiang Quan, then I'm afraid it would be one of these two. Finally, if we were to look at the outcome after the incident, then the person who benefited the most would be eldest Jiang Mississippi. Are you saying that eldest Jiang Miss plotted against your elder brother and implicated second Miss? That slut. Li Dong's face contorted. Not necessarily, but that is also the reason why I must take a trip to the Jiang Fu so that I can personally meet with these two young ladies to verify my suspicions. A sliver of determination flashed within Li An's eyes. To have the nerve to plot against elder brother, with such audacity, if you were to be caught by me. Li An's lips curled up with an anticipatory smile. His elegant face at that moment looked to be exceptionally insidious. A slow torture will be more fun. Zhang Ruan was at the moment playing Yizi cards with Lian Xiao and the others, and had successfully won each round. Lu Zhu pursed her lips saying, "Miss always wins. Shouldn't Miss at least lose one set for us servants to gain some happiness too? Or could it be that Miss is trying to swindle us?" Lian Xiao rapped her head. "What rubbish are you spouting? Just because you aren't as skillful as others you have to go and say that Miss is cheating. Don't you feel ashamed of yourself?" Zhang Ruan's brows rose. "Didn't you learn how to play Yizi cards from a young age? Why then would you require others to give you a handicap?" Lu Zhu's face flushed red. "Miss is a natural-born expert." As they were chatting and laughing, a maidservant suddenly appeared at the door saying, "Eldest Miss, Li family's second young master is in the main hall and would like to meet with you." Lian Xiao and Baiji's expression immediately changed, looking rather anxious as they looked towards Zhang Ruan. Zhang Ruan didn't reply but said, rather quick to take action, "Miss, be careful," Lu Zhu beseeched earnestly. "Second young master Li is shrewd and contriving, and this time I'm afraid he must have found out something. It was done intentionally for him to notice." Zhang Ruan grinned. "Lian Xiao, Baiji, let's go." The three of them arrived at the main hall, to find that Jiang Su and Jiang Dan were already there. At that moment, Jiang Susu was chatting with the youth. Second Miss is such a clever person, but to be possessed by a demon and having to enter a private temple certainly makes one feel pity, Lian said in a somewhat regretful manner. Jiang Susu's beautiful eyes gradually filled up with tears, appearing to be bravely restraining herself while under duress. It took just one glance to notice her woeful disposition. She lamented, "This is all Sun Yang's fate." This second young master of the Li family was completely different from eldest young master. After the incident, Li Yang had become incapacitated. Thus with the arrival of Lian today, and having him specifically request to meet her, Jiang Susu's heart initially felt somewhat apprehensive. However, upon meeting up with Lian, he was very affable, without the slightest trace of reproach. On the contrary, when he had heard that she was going to be sent to the private temple, he gently consoled her. Jiang Susu's heart flashed a thread of hate and resentment. This was the match that Xia Yan was going to arrange for Zhang Ruan, this compassionate, handsome and good-looking man. Why was Zhang Ruan always so fortunate? Zhang Ruan stood at the front of the main hall, so naturally she was able to take in the whole scene of Jiang Susu's bashful act. Her heart could not help the momentary flash of contempt racing across it. Jiang Susu could really be so naive as to think that the person before her was some affable noble young master. This particular young master's intentions were even more poisonous than the most venomous snake. From the side, Zhang Dan had all along maintained a jittery and foreboding expression. She was pleasantly surprised when she saw Zhang Ruan arrive and exclaimed, "De Jiejia." In accord, Jiang Susu and Lian turned towards Zhang Ruan. Zhang Ruan smiled as she slowly went up to Lian and offered her greetings. "A pleasure to meet you, second young master Li." Lian very quickly sized up Zhang Ruan, and smiled in reply, "Eldest Zhang Mississippi." Zhang Ruan took a seat beside Zhang Dan and looked towards Lian. "Second young master Li, is anything the matter?" She was not bothered with superfluous words, so she got straight to the point and asked Lian. Lian's eyes flashed with a hint of brilliance as he smiled and said, "It's not really any matter. It's just that something happened to my elder brother at your esteemed residence." "Oh, then how is eldest young master Li?" Her voice expressed her concern, but her eyes were serene. "Not too good." Lian's head drooped and he sighed. "On that day, my elder brother was seriously injured." "That is most unfortunate," Zhang Ruan said. Her intonation was simple and monotonous, but unbeknownst to all when Lian heard those words, they evidently became very acerbic, as they seemed to carry with them a taunting snicker. "What is eldest misunderstanding of this matter?" Lian raised his voice in query. "It merely was all a misunderstanding," Zhang Ruan smiled in reply. "Second younger sister is young and ignorant, but Ruan Yang thinks, your elder brother is not entirely without fault too." She had cleanly removed herself, very simply making light of the situation. Alongside, Jiang Susu listening in was beginning to rage within her heart. "You." She forced herself to swallow the rest of her words as earlier in the main hall, she had surreptitiously disclosed some information to Lian, pushing the whole debacle towards Zhang Ruan. "Only a misunderstanding?" Lian smirked. "I am of the thought that this was intentionally set up by someone, yet eldest miss perceives it to be a misunderstanding." "Ruan Yang personally thinks it's a misunderstanding." Zhang Ruan smiled lightly. "However, if young master thinks otherwise, you could go to the capital magistrate to request a resolution. If that doesn't yield results, you could also have the Grand Counselor accuse father in court, and His Majesty will definitely take responsibility and make a decision on your eldest brother's behalf in indicting my father. Though Ruan Yang is from the Jiang family, one can only adhere to the law. Nonetheless, Ruan Yang would like to give young master a few words of advice. From the onset, with regards to the cause of the matter, your eldest brother has to bear half of the culpability. However, if the Jiangfu has to suffer under the onslaught of investigation, I'm sure the Li family will not remain unscathed either." Lian pinned his gaze directly on Zhang Ruan's eyes. She obviously was aware that if this matter were to be reported to the capital magistrate, then the whole of the capital would know that Li Yang had been castrated. Furthermore, should the news that had remained under lock and key accidentally leaked out, based on Li Yang's character, his whole life would suffer under the weight of humiliation. Besides, if that really happened, there would be a big reshuffle with regards to the Grand Counselor's office. Thus, if the matter couldn't be brought up to the capital magistrate, it was inconceivable for the accusation to be brought before the emperor. Jiang Ruan might have seemed to be magnanimous, but in actuality, her every suggestion essentially led to a dead end. His interest was suddenly piqued and he asked, then in eldest Miss' opinion, what would be the best option to resolve the matter? That really depends on what the Grand Counselor would like to do? Jiang Ruan softly smiled. Nonetheless, once this matter gets out, the future of the Grand Counselor's office might have to depend on second young master. She spoke calmly, but her eyes communicated profound implications. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.